To come once again. Low single figures by and large in towns and cities, in the countryside just below freezing, and so a frost as we begin things on Thursday. But Thursday promises to be a brighter, drier day for many. Plenty of sunshine, you can see down the spine of the country, still 1 or 2 showers for the extreme coastal parts of the country. And Friday, well, we'll see most of those showers die away. A bit more cloud rolls in from the northwest, and we'll see some outbreaks of rain in the far northwest.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of 2 wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
I'm Colin Brazier. I've reported from more than 70 countries around the world, covered wars from Afghanistan to Iraq, from Lebanon to the Balkans. I'm trying to bring that experience, that feel for events, to the studio. And something else, I'm ready to give an opinion. Today's stories with a spark. Brazier from 8 p.m. weekdays on GB News.
Join us for the Political Correction. We're here every Sunday to correct politics and put you, the people, back in charge.
We talk about all areas of the United Kingdom, including Northern Ireland.
Our debate goes way beyond the Westminster Village. It's about the real country. It's about your opinion. So please, we want you to tell us what you think.
This is the Political Correction.
Every Sunday morning from 10 a.m. here on GB News.
Hi, I'm Patrick Christie's.
And I'm Mercy Moroki.
And we're hosting a show right here on GB News, 9:30am till 12pm, every single weekday, called to the point.
We're going to be talking about all the big issues that matter to you at home in Britain.
Absolutely, whether it's holding politicians to account, discussing what's taking place in the Channel, banging on about law and order, we're not afraid to do the absolute lot of it.
Yes, and if you're thinking it, you can guarantee that we'll be saying it.
Make sure you're here 9:30am till 12pm, every single weekday, right here on GB News, for To The Point.
Big show for you tonight. It's Mark Dolan in for Dan Wootton all this week. 2 legendary band members of Dire Straits join me live in the studio. Alan Clark and Phil Palmer are here at 10. One of the best-selling British bands of all time. Get your questions in now to 2 rock icons. Mark at gbnews.uk. Speaking of rock icons, we will appraise the career of Paul McCartney with Beatles biographer Leslie Ann Jones and Beatles superfan, good friend of the show, Mike Parry. We've also got Nigel Farage, Darren Grimes, and in the clash, is it time to legalise marijuana? We've got a lively one, so you won't want to miss a second. But first up, here are the headlines with Polly.
Mark, thank you. Good evening. The Prime Minister has warned the doomsday clock is still ticking, but he's told the COP26 summit in Glasgow a bomb disposal team is now on site. Boris Johnson also said the world faces both an economic and an environmental catastrophe if the climate isn't fixed.
My message to them, to the negotiators, is very simple. The leaders of the world may have left or are leaving COP now, but I can tell you that the eyes of the world, the eyes of the populations of the world are on you, and the eyes of the British government and all the other governments that care about this are on our negotiators, and we have your numbers.
Meanwhile, the US President Joe Biden says that tackling climate change has the potential to create lots more jobs. Joe Biden also criticised China and Russia for not turning up to the summit.
I think it's been a big mistake, quite frankly, for China, with respect to China not showing up. The rest of the world is going to look to China and say, what value added are they providing? And they've lost an ability to influence people around the world and all the people here at COP. The same way I would argue with regard to Russia.
Away from Glasgow, a British scallop trawler caught up in the fishing row between Britain and France is still being held by French authorities, despite a suggestion by the Environment Secretary George Eustace that it had been released. France stepped back last night from its threat to impose sanctions against the UK as negotiations continue between the two countries. The French President, Emmanuel Macron, however, had threatened to block British boats from the ports if the issue over fishing licences wasn't resolved. The family of a woman who died in a paddleboarding accident in Wales has been described as beautiful and kind. 24-year-old Morgan Rogers died while exploring a river in Haverfordwest. Police have confirmed the two other victims were 40-year-old Nicola Wheatley from Swansea and 42-year-old Paul O'Dwyer from Port Talbot. They were part of a group of 9 people who got into difficulty in the water over the weekend. And Facebook says it'll shut down its face recognition system and delete the face prints of more than 1 billion people. More than a third of the social media network's daily active users, about 640 million people worldwide, have opted in to have their faces recognised. In 2019, the company ended its practice of using the software to identify users' friends in uploaded photos and automatically suggest they be tagged. That's it from me. You're right up to date. I'm back in an hour.
It's Tuesday, November the 2nd. You're watching Tonight Live with me, Mark Dolan, in for Dan Wootton, who returns on Monday at 9. Lots to pack into what will be a lively 3 hours. In the clash, is it time to legalise marijuana? We will hear from all sides on that one. Our very own Nigel Farage is live later in the hour, and he'll bring us the latest on estimated numbers across the migrant at the moment channel. 20,000 this year. Shocking statistics. Nigel will have more. Top political commentator Darren Grimes joins us for The Outsider to take on the online safety bill. Is it putting us on the path to criminalising free speech? And in Uncancelled at 11, today sees the publication of Paul McCartney's top lyrics all in one volume. So is Paul McCartney a thin-skinned, egocentric numpty or a misunderstood genius and the greatest artist we've ever produced? We will appraise the life and career of one of the most successful composers of the 20th century in the company of John Lennon's biographer, Leslie Ann Jones, and broadcaster, Fleet Street journalist and Beatles superfan, Mike Parry. Plus, would doctors rather strike than see their patients face to face? We'll have all of the breaking headlines and tomorrow's news tonight in our Media Buzz. As always, before the end of the show, we will reveal today's Greatest Britain and Union Jackass. And my big question guests are 2 members of one of the greatest British bands of all time. Alan Clark and Phil Palmer of Dire Straits are live at 10. You won't want to miss that one. So now is the time to get in touch. Send your questions via email to mark@gbnews.uk. So lots to get through. My priority is to get your views on the national television airwaves. So do stay in touch with me on that email throughout the show. And let's get to work. One of the themes of the pandemic has been shutting down all dissenting voices. We know plenty of high-profile individuals and organisations that have been deplatformed by Facebook, YouTube and Twitter. However, in Britain, we do mercifully still have a free press. Networks like this one, GBNews, and brilliant newspapers like The Mail and The Telegraph in particular have called out much of the COVID madness over the last year and a half, and I salute them. No such luck in New Zealand, where St Jacinda Ardern, the holier-than-thou Prime Minister of New Zealand, has hosted a press conference which was about as conducive to open debate as an audience with Kim Jong-un. Check this out.
And what I'd say is that we're all actually completely on the same page when it comes to driving vaccinations and making sure that we're doing everything that we can to reach people that we need to. This is an issue of. This is an issue.
Not working in Israel.
Sir, I'm going to ask. I'm going to answer the questions of the accredited media.
Also in the UK.
Sir, I will shut down the press conference if you do not cease.
It's rude to lie.
Sorry, to our accredited members of the gallery here, we might move to an inside venue. Unfortunately, we've got someone who's disrupting your press conference today, so we might reconvene. Thank you.
There shall be no dissent. Accredited press only, asking accredited questions for which the public will receive accredited answers. I'm horrified by what has happened to this once freedom-loving and truly great nation. Here is Saint Jacinda happily acknowledging that she has reintroduced apartheid to a Western nation.
So you basically see this is going to be like, well, it's almost like, you probably don't see it like this, the two different classes of people. If you're vaccinated or if you're unvaccinated, you have all these rights. If you are vaccinated...
That is what it is, so yep.
Saint Jacinda, the Kiwi Mussolini. COVID has turned so many supposedly democratic leaders into out-of-control dictators whose power base is driven by the hellish ideology of zero COVID. But you wait, because the pursuit of net zero will further embolden those who rule over us to control our lives. Net zero will make the pandemic look like the Queen's garden party. You have been warned. Another day, another great artist is attacked by a woke institution. William Hogarth is one of our greatest 18th century artists. Famous for his satirical portraits of drunken Londoners and a permissive, indulgent society, this guy was an absolute legend. Part cartoon, part social commentary, part artistic genius. Students and art lovers alike have for decades drawn upon these images for entertainment, amusement, and an authentic, compelling portrait of a moment in our past. But now the art gallery that houses this amazing work has decided that it's got to be criticised, demonised, and apologised for. A new exhibition has suggested that his pictures, far from being satirical genius, are in fact no laughing matter, because their subjects are drunk on the spoils of slavery. God forbid that these joyless censors should have a sense of humour. There will be no levity, no wit, no smiling or laughter in the new Republic of Woke. These people want to censor great treasures because they think you cannot be trusted with this dangerous material. Material which has inspired and infused generation after generation, and which is now too hot to handle for the thick and intolerant common man. Now, you need to be taught, according to these people. You need to be lectured, and you will learn. For God's sake, it's an art gallery, not a bloody primary school. That's the point. These academics and these censorious institutions are signed up to an extremist, politically correct ideology and are essentially out to destroy these great artists and their great works. There's no way that Hogarth would get a gig as an artist in 2021 with these bullies around. The only thing that stops this man being cancelled altogether is history. The likes of J.K. Rowling, Ricky Gervais and comedian Dave Chappelle are too rich and powerful to be cancelled. Well, Hogarth is too old, too suffused in our culture to be cancelled, and thank God for that. But it doesn't stop these thugs diluting the legacy of so many of our great artists. Don't forget the Globe Theatre, which was lovingly built to celebrate the work of Shakespeare, the greatest writer of plays in all human history. The Globe have set about the task of decolonising Shakespeare, weeding out passages from King Lear, Macbeth, and Romeo and Juliet which are problematic. Decolonising Shakespeare is going to be very difficult for them, given that Shakespeare existed before the colonial era began. But there is no logic to this frothing, swivel-eyed fundamentalism. What right does this generation have to touch any artistic works of the past? I think the Globe Theatre should be ashamed of themselves for daring to touch a syllable of Shakespeare. Frankly, they should house Shakespeare at a venue where his work is actually appreciated. Maybe they should just tear down the Globe Theatre and replace it with a Tesco's. Maybe one of those nice big ones. You know, the ones that sell socks, kettles and potted plants. God, I could spend hours in one of those places. Paperback books, frying pans, underwear, living the dream. So how dare these people impose their narrow, politicised, moralising judgment on Shakespeare, Hogarth, or even the Rolling Stones for that matter? The Stones have had to take Brown Sugar off their playlist and will never sing it again live. This is mad. Music enjoyed by every race, creed and colour on the planet for decades is being cancelled now. How is that progress? And there are libraries in America removing problematic books. What the hell is a problematic book? Any book worth its salt is problematic, sparking a debate, stimulating the reader, and furthering human knowledge. Here's the point. History decides what we look at, what we exhibit, and what we learn from. William Hogarth is long dead and not in a position to protect his work and decide how it's presented. If he were alive, he would understandably withdraw his work from this particular gallery. Do you think that Damien Hirst would put up with some stupid disclaimer about animal rights next to his pickled shark? There it is, an amazing piece of work, but you'd probably get cancelled for that now. He'd probably take his famous stuffed sheep, and there it is, and he would tell the censors to get stuffed. It's profoundly wrong and damaging to politicise the way that any artwork is presented. Art doesn't need a disclaimer, an apology or an explanation. Charlie Chaplin hated doing interviews. He said, if you want to understand me, watch my movies. And that's the same for all great artists. All you need for Hogarth, Van Gogh, Constable, Tracy Emin and Damien Hirst is the title of the piece and the year it was created. The rest is up to the viewer. The relationship between the artist and the person beholding their work is a sacred one, and it doesn't need a middleman to help you interpret it. What we're dealing with here, and it's a problem in universities and other public institutions like the National Trust, is a privileged cadre of Britain-hating elitists. And frankly, it's the woke Taliban who are attacking and eroding our culture who should be in a museum. Reacting to the big stories of the day is my amazing panel tonight. Former editor of the Daily Star, Dawn Neeson, political commentator Andre Walker, and GB News' very own head of digital and presenter here, Becca Hudson. Fantastic to have all of you with me. And Becca, do you think that Hogarth requires some kind of warning next to his paintings?
Yeah, I'm incredibly enthused about this exhibition. I'm hoping that you and I will get to go together, Mark, and enjoy it. I think the ambitions to decolonise art history and to include the narratives and the voices and experiences of people who were depicted but haven't been involved in the telling of history, I think is really important. And we're not cancelling Hogarth, we're just recontextualising him in a post-BLM, post-Me Too world. And I think it's absolutely fantastic, and it just makes him more relevant, and we learn more about ourselves from this exhibition.
See, back in the day, Becca, you'd go to an art gallery, it would be Van Gogh's Sunflowers, and you would have the date of the painting and the name of the painter, and you were good to go.
Sure, and now look, isn't it incredible that now you can go and enjoy the art and the comedy and the parody on society at the time, but you can also understand the implications and the consequences of what's being depicted. It's a richer experience, and you can get closer to the art by understanding how different people from different communities, different marginalised voices experience.
But it's all there on the painting. I mean, that's the point about art. Art does the talking.
No, well, you said it yourself. You said
if I was Hogarth, I would rip down every single one of those little plaques.
No, you wouldn't.
Chuck them into a bonfire.
No, you wouldn't. You'd enjoy the money that's going to be made from this exhibition, because there are voices and people's experiences who have been excluded from art history for so long. I think it's incredible that we can juxtapose how they interpret that art with how it was intended at the time. It makes the history richer, makes the experience more interesting.
I think you can buy a book about 18th century art and you can read it before or after you've been to the exhibition. But if you're in an art gallery, you look at the painting.
Who would
and you make your own mind up, and you're not spoon-fed politics by woke academics.
No, you're not being spoon-fed anything. I would imagine that book would be written by
these people are drunk on the spoils of slavery. No, they're just bloody drunk.
No, but the context of history at the time was that they were. And how I think it's so
because there were
interesting
not very strong rules about gin palaces. More's the pity. They should bring them back. I could do with a drink now.
I think, and I think I'd agree with you as well. Sure, we could read a book about art history, probably written by a white male academic who doesn't have the same experience as the incredible minority voices that are being platformed by this exhibition. I think it's great. Really excited by it.
Andre.
You invented a new word, the reader, and I want to defend. No, I want to defend the reader because haven't we heard a billion times about the big media moguls? We've heard about all this. Oh, let's do this BLM. Let's do all this woke this and rubbish that, and let's all talk in our Hampstead parties about this. I support the reader, a word you invented, the people who are actually the customers of this, the people who actually pay the bills, because all that ever happens with these things is we pay for these art galleries to exist, we pay for the National Trust to exist. How many times has there been an AGM of the National Trust in the past 2 years, and the clue's in the question, when members of the National Trust have started absolutely kicking off about the way the National Trust ignores its members completely? I think it's time to support the reader. I appreciate that you invented that word by accident, but if that is a word that represents the people who consume this rather than the people who think they own it, then God bless you, pal. You came up with a new concept. And listen, Dan Wootton was only away 5 minutes. You did it already. Amazing.
Well, I'm honoured. Thank you so much for your positive spin there, Andre. But Dawn, we've got warnings on UK Gold and on Dave about old sitcoms. Be careful, folks. What you're about to watch could be very, very dangerous material. I've had enough of it.
Totally. And fairy tales, let's not forget fairy tales, which are corrupting young girls to believe that they are all wilting and waiting for the prince to come and rescue them. No, we survived our childhoods without that, don't worry. But I've actually got tickets to go and see this exhibition in a couple of weeks' time. Love Hogarth, as you say, it's a great satire. And the paintings are fun. There were people having a nice time and enjoying themselves. And I would just like to say that, they're censoring this because of its links to slavery, OK? Because they were drunk on the spoils of slavery. Well, OK, if we follow that to the extreme, Mark, it means that none of us will ever wear cotton or drink tea or wear indigo-dyed denim jeans or smoke tobacco or drink rum. All of these things have been linked to slavery. So does that mean now we have to censor ourselves and stop doing all these things? It's insane. I mean, that was the past. This is now. We learn from the past and we move on.
But hang on, but let me just say
Andre,
this.
go on.
Isn't part of this constant attempt to say that democracy and capitalism and freedom is not the reason that the West is rich? Look, at the end of the Soviet Union, socialist economics and socialist systems of democracy were so discredited. Nowadays, what the left are saying is, because they can't pretend that socialism works, they can pretend that capitalism, freedom and democracy is not the reason that Britain and America and Australia, New Zealand and the free world are rich. They're trying to denigrate that, and that's the real point
and
behind
Becca,
all of this.
I think Andre makes a fantastic point because, Becca, the bottom line is that the left now cannot win an election. I don't think Labour will ever achieve an overall majority in the House of Commons ever again. And so that the way the left is sort of taking over is from within the country and within our institutions.
Is it left-wing to just want to make sure that everyone who lives in this country has their experience represented in national institutions that, as Andre points out, we all pay for? I don't think that's left-wing. I think that's just sensible pragmatism.
Extreme political correctness within the world of art and culture is a left phenomenon.
Do you think it's extreme political correctness to have a plaque? Can I just finish?
It's about cancellation.
It's extreme rudeness.
You know it's about cancellation.
It's extreme rudeness.
You know it's about cancellation.
I don't think it's politically correct to put a plaque next to a painting that merely contextualises the painting. I think it's completely fine, and I think actually enhances the art. And if you want to keep this history with us and actually understand it, we're only adding to the layers of history and the experience. I think it's absolutely great, and I don't think it's politically correct or wrong to want to include marginalised voices. I think that's democratic.
And yet, the end result is always we take them down.
Who's taking it down? It's up in the Tate. You can go see it if you go to the Tate.
There's a bunch of warnings and apologies.
Speaking as the only one that's actually going to this exhibition, and I was before all of this kicked off, I don't want these warnings on the wall, though. I want to make up my own minds about things, and I will be having a cup of tea while I'm walking around.
Yeah, I just think it's Britain-hating guff, but that's my view. What do you think? Mark at gbnews.uk. Christine says, Mark, the whole point about Hogarth's art is that it's a critique of life at the time. Plaques giving woke explanations is garbage and anti-educational. Dear Mark, I want to know why the government aren't clamping down on these woke culture terrorists. There you go. Lots more on that. Alan says, listening to the discussions of Mark's monologue and the words, well, Alan's not happy with some of the views of my panel. And we'll get to
I
more
love
of
you,
those.
Alan. I
Poor
love you, Alan.
I've just cancelled Alan. Not at all, Alan. Keep those opinions
Come on,
coming.
Alan. Come on, Alan.
And remember, up the readia. Lots more to come. In the clash next, is it time to legalise marijuana? See you in 2.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of 2 wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
I'm Colin Brazier. I've reported from more than 70 countries around the world, covered wars from Afghanistan to Iraq, from Lebanon to the Balkans. I'm trying to bring that experience, that feel for events, to the studio. And something else, I'm ready to give an opinion. Today's stories with a spark. Brazier from 8 p.m. weekdays on GB News.
Join us for the political correction. We're here every Sunday to correct politics and put you, the people, back in charge.
We talk about all areas of the United Kingdom, including Northern Ireland.
Our debate goes way beyond the Westminster Village. It's about the real country. It's about your opinion. So please, we want you to tell us what you think.
This is the political correction.
Every Sunday morning from 10 a.m. here on GB News.
Hi, I'm Patrick Christie's.
And I'm Mercy Moroki.
And we're hosting a show right here on GB News, 9:30am till 12pm, every single weekday, called To The Point.
We're going to be talking about all the big issues that matter to you at home in Britain.
Absolutely, whether it's holding politicians to account, discussing what's taking place in the Channel, banging on about law and order, we're not afraid to do the absolute lot of it.
Yes, and if you're thinking it, you can guarantee that we'll be saying it.
Make sure you're here 9:30am till 12pm, every single weekday, right here on GB News for To The Point.
There we are. I'll get to more of your thoughts on the monologue shortly. What do you think about trigger warnings around great iconic British artists like Hogarth? And don't forget, Nigel Farage is with us very shortly. What the Farage? We'll be discussing the ongoing migrant crisis in the Channel. But next up, the clash, in which we tackle big topics of the day from opposing points of view. And a protest earlier today by the End Our Pain campaign sought an easier path to getting medical cannabis under prescription. Even though the law around this changed 3 years ago, extending access, many thousands are still not able to get this pain relief and are seeking greater access. So should we just go the whole hog and legalise marijuana? To debate this, I'm delighted to welcome Matt Hughes, co-founder and director of Medcan Support, a hub for education, research and advocacy around the use of cannabis for children. Matt's own son has been privately prescribed cannabis for epilepsy for 2 years now. We're also joined by a good friend of the show, Graham Whettone, former top cop and author of How to Be a Police Officer. And I'm also pleased to welcome Professor Mike Barnes, consultant neurologist and medical cannabis expert. Professor Barnes, can we start with you, please? Can you tell me about some of the benefits of medical cannabis, of just how transformative it can be?
Yes, certainly. I mean, cannabis has been around for about 5,000 years. In fact, it was the first medicine described and written down about in the ancient Chinese community. So we've known about it for a long time. It's not a new medicine. Some people say this is new, we don't know much about it. Of course we do, we know a lot about it. And what it does from a medical point of view, and I'm not at the moment talking about recreational or spiritual use, but from a medical point of view, it's really helpful for a lot of chronic conditions like pain. That's the most widely prescribed use. Anxiety and other neurological conditions, as we might talk about in a moment, particularly for childhood epilepsy. It can be life transforming. Not for everybody. It's not right for everybody. I'm not saying it is, but for many people, it's a remarkably useful addition to the doctor's panoply of potential treatment options.
Are there any downsides to its availability, Professor Barnes? Can it be abused? Or would you say that if there's any medical condition, then frankly, knock yourself out with medical cannabis?
Yeah, I think we need to clarify just for a moment that there's many, 147 to be exact, cannabinoids in the plant. Now, we all hear about THC. That's the one that's high in the plant that gets you high. That if you go to the street and buy it, it's high in THC. That's what the recreational street users want. The other main cannabinoid in the plant is called CBD. That's the one that has a lot of medical properties, as does THC. But the important point to remember is if you prescribe cannabis with CBD, it counteracts the high of THC. So the point of medical prescription is not to get high. And it's very rare for people to get high with a medical prescription. That's not the point, and it doesn't happen. And we should remember that.
It's really important you point that out. How exactly does medical cannabis work in the body? Why does it relieve many symptoms?
It interacts, we all have, all vertebrates, and obviously humans, we have what's called an endocannabinoid system. So we all have cannabis receptors in our brain. We're born with them. And we have natural cannabinoids produced in the brain, one called anandamide, and there's several of them. They interact with those receptors, and what they do is they balance the brain function out. It's called homeostasis. They smooth things out, if you like. So it helps anxiety, it helps pain, it helps the abnormal, if you like epilepsy. And that's a natural system. And the plant cannabis simply interacts with our own inbuilt endocannabinoid system. That's how it works. So it's a natural product that's enhancing our own system.
Are there any known side effects? Can you overdose?
Sure. Yeah, well, like any medicine, it's not right for everybody. And we know, for example, that street cannabis can make schizophrenia worse. It can induce psychosis. But we shouldn't confuse that with the medical cannabis for the reasons I've just said. CBD counteracts that high. And sure, it's not right for everybody. It increases the pulse rate, for example, and that's not right for people with heart conditions. So, like any medicine, there's people in the population who shouldn't take cannabis. And also, we should say, even if you can take it and it's right for you to take it, it doesn't work for everybody. So I'm not one of these people who push it as some sort of magic solution, cures everything, cures cancer. That's nonsense. But it's a really helpful thing for a lot of chronic, long-term conditions like pain, like anxiety, like epilepsy.
Matt Hughes, you are the co-founder and director of MedCan Support, a hub for education, research and advocacy around the use of cannabis for children. And your own son has been privately prescribed cannabis for his epilepsy. Can you tell me how important this application has been for his condition?
Extremely important. It's life-changing. He was having up to 120 seizures per day, and that was on 4 anti-epileptics. Since we've introduced medical cannabis, that's reduced down to 20 or less. So, it's not, as Mike says, it's not a cure-all, but it's transformed his life and ours as well as his parents.
And we know that 3 years ago, the law changed, Matt, making these particular medications, this medical cannabis, available to those who were in need for health reasons. So why has your son not been able to be prescribed cannabis?
It basically goes down to the NICE guidelines and the BPNA, which is the British Paediatric Neurology Association. So the two guidance together is preventing clinicians from prescribing cannabis but also, clinicians in the UK have grown up with prohibition. They've seen cannabis as this harmful street drug, and they're not educated in the endocannabinoid system, which Mike has just spoken about, nor are they educated in cannabis. So there's a huge amount of stigma still associated with cannabis. There's a misconception between, or misunderstanding between medical and recreational use. And the guidance is asking for more evidence. But we've got tons of evidence. There's, even in the UK, we now have 22 children to show 92% chance of being effective for epilepsy, which is huge, and an 85% reduction in seizures. So as anti-epileptics go, that's really good. So we've got the evidence. We just need NICE to be accepting of real-world evidence, of observational evidence, to be able to allow clinicians to prescribe.
Now, Graham Wetone, the former police officer, is currently unavailable, but I'm delighted to welcome former police officer Mike Neville instead. Mike, thank you so much for stepping in at the last minute. Mike, it strikes me that a simple fix for this would be to legalise cannabis altogether, legalise marijuana.
Well, it's a big problem in the UK because the Misuse of Drugs Act refers to controlled drugs, but who controls them? It's certainly not the government or the police, it's the criminals. And I saw the impact of drug dealing, being in charge of the drug squad at Brixton and then as a DI and a DCI. And it's a complete mess. And we either do one thing or the other in this country. What we do at the moment is we try and do a halfway house. We either ruthlessly crush drugs, which I think will end in failure, or we legalise it and it's sold in a proper manner. And as the professor has said, this medicinal cannabis is all checked and the like. The danger comes from like very high quality cannabis like the skunk, which is very, very dangerous and sold on the streets. The whole thing would be better if it was controlled by the government and drugs were sold. And I think that people would be quite bored, really. I knew a Rasta guy who used to sell anodins as LSD, and middle-class white kids would buy them and go back again because they got the thrill from buying them from this dodgy drug dealer. So the whole thing is a farce. We need to look at this as a country. We copied American prohibition in the 60s, and as we know, it didn't work with alcohol, so why would it work with drugs? And if it's bringing medical relief, we need to ensure that it's properly tested and it goes through proper laboratories and it's available for everybody who needs it. But we can't carry on with this ridiculous halfway house of, we'll legalise cannabis, but not this one, and you can legalise possession, but not dealing. You've got to do all or none. And at the moment, we're in the middle.
And what do you think about that, Professor Mike Barnes? Do you think that it would simplify things, especially for the regulators, if marijuana was simply legal?
Well, it would simplify it for the regulators. My concern about that, and I think the recreational debate is a perfectly valid debate and one that we should have in the country. But what I'd like to see first is get the medical prescriptions sorted. Because the problem about legalising it, they've seen that in Canada and some of the US states where it's been totally legalised, the people who have struggled to get their prescription from their doctor, and in this country, we do struggle to get prescriptions from our doctors, they'll go to the recreational market, they'll buy something, and of course they're not guided medically. They don't know quite what to get, they don't know quite what dose to take, and I would personally rather see the medical market sorted out first, and then let's have a debate about the recreational market.
What do you think about this, Matt? Do you think it would simplify things if marijuana were legal across the board?
No, I completely agree with Mike. We need to get medical sorted, medical access. If we went down the legalisation route, yes, there are some patients that may benefit from that can't afford private prescriptions. But if we had it freely available, children like my son, they can't use recreational or go to a dispensary. So in Canada, we support and talk to parents in Canada, and they've got dispensaries on their street corner, but the cannabis from the dispensaries is just not to a standard that is suitable for their child's epilepsy. So yeah, I completely agree. We need to get the medical situation sorted first.
And clearly, Matt, the issue with your son's access to medical use marijuana is this sort of legacy of prohibition. I mean, that's the issue. That's why there's such a grey area.
Yeah, that's something that within the cannabis sector is everyone's trying to help educate. So you've got the Medical Cannabis Clinician Society, you've got MedCan Support, several other advocacy groups, and we're all trying to educate and just remove the stigma and talk about cannabis as a medicine. That's what it is, to push things forward.
I mean, I would imagine it's a significant cost for your family to seek private prescriptions for medical cannabis for your son.
Yes, so we're paying £650 a month. So we're now at the point that actually we can't increase his dose any longer. There are families with children that are heavier and older that require higher amounts of oil. So their prescriptions can cost anything up to £2,000. So yeah, for the families that are paying for private prescriptions, it's a huge burden. And again, this is why we keep fighting for NHS access.
The issue we have, though, Mike, when we talk about legalising cannabis across the board is it normalises the consumption of what is, in the end, a drug.
Yes, but we legalised the consumption of alcohol and look at the consequences of that. And most people are inherently sensible. When they said the pubs were going to open all day, we were told there was going to be these drunken zombies everywhere. But most people have to go to work. Most people have to do things. Most people don't spend all the time in the pub. So most people are sensible. We could do more. And I think in this context, it is removing the stigma that people find when they want to get the cannabis. So I'm involved in a wider debate. As I say, there's two options: either ruthlessly crush all drugs, or which we've tried and failed, or we do something else, which was legalise it. Canada's been mentioned, and Holland. The difference there is it's legal to possess it, but not legal to deal with it. So another ridiculous halfway house. It can't carry on. As a society, we're going to look at what we do about drugs and deal with them better.
And do you think, Professor Barnes, that ultimately medical cannabis should be available at your pharmacy without prescription?
That's a very good question. And in some of the states and in parts of Canada, what happens is the doctor approves the prescription. They check whether it's safe for you, whether you've got a condition that might benefit from it. And then you take that medical card, if you like, to a pharmacy where you talk to a properly trained pharmacist. Called bud tenders, interestingly, in parts of the states, because it's a complicated subject. There's several thousand strains of cannabis. They're all slightly different, and it's a dedicated doctor that learns all that. So what I would like to see is the medical profession screening people, if you like, make sure it's safe, make sure there's a condition for which it might be helped, and then go to a properly trained pharmacist and get the right prescription for you and your condition. That's what I'd like to see.
Mike Neville, if we were to legalise cannabis, is that not an admission that the police and the authorities have failed? And where do you draw the line? Do we legalise cocaine or heroin?
Well, the police failed when the prohibition of alcohol. All we saw was gangsters in Chicago shooting each other. And I think we could legalise other drugs. So you get heroin and cocaine in medical forms. If it was sold at the chemist, it wouldn't be so fashionable. And as I always say, I've just said that most people are inherently sensible. They don't take these things, and they've got to work hard. And there's tests to catch people drink driving or drug driving. The current situation just fuels crime. So houses are burgled, old ladies are mugged, people are shot and stabbed in drugs gang war. And as I mentioned before, if the drugs are controlled by anybody, they're controlled by criminals, and that's just not good enough. And it's letting the public down. We're telling lies. There is no war on drugs. People have just surrendered, and they're just letting them get on with it, to be honest.
Matt Hughes, I wish your son well, and I hope that he gets this very important prophylactic via the NHS soon. Matt Hughes, co-founder and director of MedCan Support, and former police officer Mike Neville. Thanks, Mike, for the last-minute booking. And Professor Mike Barnes, consultant neurologist and medical cannabis expert. What do you think? Does it open a cannabis of worms to legalise this drug? Let me know your thoughts. mark@gbnews.uk. Coming up, there's still time for you to make your voice heard in tonight's big question with 2 stars of Dire Straits. That's right, Alan Clark and Phil Palmer are live in the studio at 10. So get your questions in now via email to mark@gbnews.uk. But in What the Farage after the break, how bad has the migrant situation in the Channel become? And France back down. Overfishing. See you in 2.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of 2 wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
I'm Colin Brazier. I've reported from more than 70 countries around the world, covered wars from Afghanistan to Iraq, from Lebanon to the Balkans. I'm trying to bring that experience, that feel for events, to the studio. And something else, I'm ready to give an opinion. Today's stories with a spark. Brazier from 8 p.m. weekdays on GB News.
Join us for the political correction. We're here every Sunday to correct politics and put you, the people, back in charge.
We talk about all areas of the United Kingdom, including Northern Ireland.
Our debate goes way beyond the Westminster Village. It's about the real country. It's about your opinion. So please, we want you to tell us what you think.
This is the political correction.
Every Sunday morning from 10 a.m. here on GB News.
Hi, I'm Patrick Christie's.
And I'm Mercy Moroki.
And we're hosting a show right here on GB News, 9:30 a.m. till 12 p.m. every single weekday, called To The Point.
We're going to be talking about all the big issues that matter to you at home in Britain.
Absolutely, whether it's holding politicians to account, discussing what's taking place in the Channel, banging on about law and order, we're not afraid to do the absolute lot of it.
Yes, and if you're thinking it, you can guarantee that we'll be saying it.
Make sure you're here 9:30 a.m. till 12 p.m. every single weekday, right here on GB News for To The Point.
The Tate Britain Art Gallery are going to have warnings placing the work of the great artist Hogarth into context of slavery and our colonial past. Lots of emails coming in. It's the topic of my monologue, which you can find on our Twitter feed at GB News. Joseph says, Mark, these attacks on art and culture are very worrying indeed. You are one of the few journalists that gets it. This kind of dark, sinister move and internal combustion contributes to the collapse of so many empires. In the USSR, this was known as the Colour Revolution, an external campaign orchestrated mainly from America, their State Department and the CIA. Worrying trend indeed. Michelle says, hi Mark, enough is enough. Freedom of speech and thought is what makes Britain great. It's time the lefty woke brigade acknowledged the only reason they can spout their left-wing wokeism is because of the sacrifices our country made in the Second World War to ensure democracy prevailed. We don't need or want an elitist woke person who is paid way above the national wage telling us how to think, how to view art, music and literature. Great show as always. Well, Michelle, thank you so much for mentioning that. And by the way, in relation to the Second World War, even Churchill is currently being cancelled. So frankly, all bets are off when it comes to this madness. Now, as always at this time, I'm delighted to welcome the man who changed the world. Yes, it's Nigel Farage in What the Farage. Now, since the start of the year, around 20,000 people have reached the UK after navigating busy shipping lanes from France in small boats. That's more than double the total for the whole of 2020. And in a report, The Guardian cites a source from the Home Office saying that of those arriving by small boats in 2020, 87% were men and 74% were aged between 18 and 39. Surely not exactly the definition of vulnerable people. Well, Nigel Farage joins me now. Hello, Nigel.
Yes, hello, Mark. Good evening.
Brilliant show tonight. Really enjoyed it, Nigel. And this problem in the Channel is not going away. If anything, it's getting worse.
Yes, the pull factors are still there. 4-star hotel, 3 square meals a day, free dental care. And guess what? If you come into Britain illegally, you even get a face-to-face GP appointment. I mean, how about that? And sorry, nearly forgot, 38 quid a week spending money. And of course, access very quickly into the booming illegal black economy in this country. And of course, for many who come, they've got very nice iPhones and Nike trainers and all the rest of it, and they think they're going to come and make a fortune. Many, of course, finish up in a modern form of slavery. I'm astonished the left don't talk about this. Of the few women that come, well, no great prizes for guessing what happens to many of them. And yet we brush all this under the carpet. And we have this narrative about poor migrants. And all the Times newspaper do is show you pictures of women and children. Those figures today, exactly what I've been saying for the last 2 years, it's 90% young men. I mean, that's what it is. And it's out of control. The pull factors are there. And do you know something? Of the over 20,000 that have come this year, there's not been a single deportation, not one. So you may as well hang a sign on the White Cliffs of Dover to say, we are open. And I have to say, I predicted back in April that the number this year would be 20,000. Depending on the weather between now and Christmas, I think it could be nearer 30,000. A lot is weather dependent. And next year, well, what I've been told from good intelligence is they're planning much, much bigger boats. They're planning boats that can take up to 200 at a time. So who's to say that next year can't be 30, 40, 50, 60,000? All young men that we have to accommodate. And here's the real point. Nobody needs to lecture us about giving refugee status, be it to Huguenots, be it to Ugandan Asians, be it to Jewish people from Russia or from Austria or from Germany. We're rather good at this. We always have been. But the vast majority of these people that are coming would never qualify as being people directly in fear of their lives or liberty because of their beliefs or their ethnicity. They just happen to come from countries that may not be particularly stable or particularly nice. But we can't simply open the door to tens of millions. So the real question is what to do. Priti Patel has been promising us since August 2019 that it's all going to be sorted out. And all it does is get worse. Here's the crux of it. There is no solution to this that will please the international community. Just as Tony Abbott in Australia turned the boats around and towed them back to Indonesia to the condemnation of the UN and everybody else. But you know what? The boats stopped coming. And until we start taking people back to France, depositing them back on French shores, this won't end. It's as simple as that. And by the way,
I hear you, Michael. I hear you, and that's certainly a point made by Neil Hamilton, the new permanent leader of UKIP, who spoke to me on this show last night. But can you deposit these migrants back to France without the cooperation of the French authorities?
Yes, you just do it. You just do it. And you'll be condemned by the European Union. You'll be condemned by everybody. We'll be called heartless and cruel. But if people realise that coming via these illegal means they will not be allowed to settle, they will stop coming. It's just as simple as that.
And do you think that the majority of these young men are economic migrants? What motivates this passage, Nigel?
Money. 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 They think they're coming to a country where they can make a lot of money, and some of them will. But most will finish up in the fruit picking industry, in the drugs trade. Most will finish up somehow in the illegal economy. Many will effectively become modern day slaves, and that is part of the shame of it. But, they've got, because they've got iPhones and internet, and they know that in France, they won't be given anything. You can see why they want to come here. The pull factors are there, deportations are zero, and operations tonight were continuing into the dark. And the intelligence I've got is that tomorrow will be huge. Huge.
And of course, the weather is a big factor, isn't it, Nigel?
Massive, yeah, of course. And you need relatively calm conditions. Otherwise, the channel is incredibly difficult and even more dangerous. 3 drowned last week. I mean, goodness knows how many actually do drown that we never even hear about. So yeah, weather is a big factor. But if we get a big high pressure between now and Christmas that just sort of sits over the country, during which, of course, the wind turbines won't work either, then, as I say, we could be nearer 30,000 by the end of the year than 20,000.
And of course, ultimately, you could argue that this is a humanitarian crisis, the fact that there is this trade in human lives, and that's why it's got to stop. Yeah,
and of course, the criminal gangs are making, in a good week, With good weather, the criminal gangs are making millions of euros every single week. And there were some guys in prison the other day, 3 of them, put away for quite long sentences. They made 4 million euros, just 3 of them, over the course of the last year. So it's big money, it's people trafficking, and as I say, to deal with it is going to take really strong political will, and I don't believe, for the life of me, that Boris Johnson possesses that will. And I'll add one more thing, if I may, on this point. Undocumented young men without proof of identity, but we know among them are some who do not wish us well. This is a major security risk to our nation. And perhaps, in the light of the appalling, and I'm going to use the word assassination of Sir David Amess, we need to think a little bit harder about this.
It's very important that we know who is coming into the country. It's also bad news for those who are legally seeking refuge in this country. And this evil crime and this evil industry puts those people to the back of the queue. So, Nigel, I can agree with you more on that one. Now, it's been reported, Nigel, that France have backed down in their fishing row after Jersey offered to move things forward. Paris shelved plans to ban UK boats from French ports following last-ditch talks. But how long will this détente last, Nigel?
Not long. This is not over. I mean, the injustice of the whole thing is incredible. 103 French boats are allowed to fish up to our 6-mile line. Do you know how many of our boats can fish in their 6 to 12-mile limit? 1. There are over 1,500 other boats fishing in British territorial waters. We've given everything away. The fisheries deal that Boris Johnson did was a complete sellout. In theory, we have control of our nation's waters back, but in practice we don't. And surprise, surprise, we learned today that all these French boats claiming they should be allowed to fish close to Jersey and 6 miles from the mainland, surprise, surprise, we learn that many of them are fibbing. Many of them have made up the data. And that is the story of the CFP from the start. A very quick potted history, if I may. Hours before Ted Heath signed the treaty to take us into the common market, as it was all those years ago, hours before, they panicked in Brussels. The Brits have got all these fish. So they literally invented the common fisheries policy within 2 days of Britain joining. Heath was presented it by his chief negotiator, the appropriately named Sir Con Coughlin, and he said, "This is terrible." And Heath said, "Swallow the lot and swallow it whole." That's what we did. Then as the CFP developed, they asked British, French and other fishermen for historic records. The French just doubled and tripled anything they'd ever caught, and the Brits said, "We're not telling you." Shows you the cultural difference, doesn't it, between the French and the British, and we've been at a disadvantage ever since then. Most of these French boats that have been refused have no historic access to British waters. If they did, their logbooks would record it. To even claim they have it means they're actually admitting they were fishing illegally. And they're trying it on because a French vessel with a license to fish up to R6 is going to be worth 2 or 3 times one for inshore French waters. They're trying it on. Macron wants the lot. Macron wants confrontation at every level. You know what? Let's give it to him.
Nigel, brilliant stuff. As always, Nigel returns tomorrow at 7 o'clock on GB News. Thank you so much for joining us. Lots more to come.
Hi there. Clearing skies overnight will lead to a chilly night in places with a touch of frost by dawn. Showers will continue around coastal areas, and it's around coast where we'll tend to avoid the lowest temperatures because of those showers and a brisk breeze. The breeze coming in from the north at the moment, it's containing some fairly cold air. The isobar's reasonably well spaced, so inland, lighter winds, clear skies as well. Well, that will lead to that chilly night.
but around coastal areas, showers will continue, along with a bit of a breeze, Northern Ireland, parts of West Wales into Cornwall, northern Scotland, and increasingly down this North Sea coast of northern England and eastern Scotland. Otherwise, inland, temperatures dipping into the low single figures, perhaps a little below freezing in one or two sheltered spots. So a cold start to Wednesday. A frosty start in places, one or two mist and fog patches towards the southeast, perhaps the Midlands as well. Otherwise, plenty of sunshine inland, but this area of cloud and showers will make an appearance into the east of England, northern and eastern Scotland, as well as western parts of the UK. And so where we've got the showers, where we've got a brisk breeze from the sea, it is certainly going to feel on the cold side, but there will be some sunshine around, perhaps a few more showers, I think, in the east compared to Tuesday. Those showers continue for a time on Wednesday night, and then eventually most showers die away. Lengthy clear spells for the majority, just some showers continuing for some western and northern coasts, and a chilly night to come once again. Low single figures by and large in towns and cities, in the countryside just below freezing. And so a frost as we begin things on Thursday. But Thursday promises to be a brighter, drier day for many. Plenty of sunshine. You can see down the spine of the country, still one or two showers for the extreme coastal parts of the country. And Friday, well, we'll see most of those showers die away. A bit more cloud rolls in from the northwest, and we'll see some outbreaks of rain in the far northwest.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
I'm Colin Brazier. I've reported from more than 70 countries around the world, covered wars from Afghanistan to Iraq, from Lebanon to the Balkans. I'm trying to bring that experience, that feel for events, to the studio. And something else, I'm ready to give an opinion. Today's stories with a spark. Brazier from 8 p.m. weekdays on GB News.
Join us for the political correction. We're here every Sunday to correct politics and put you, the people, back in charge.
We talk about all areas of the United Kingdom, including Northern Ireland.
Our debate goes way beyond the Westminster Village. It's about the real country. It's about your opinion. So please, we want you to tell us what you think.
This is the political correction.
Every Sunday morning from 10 a.m. here on GB News.
Hi, I'm Patrick Christie's.
And I'm Mercy Moroki.
And we're hosting a show right here on GB News, 9:30 a.m. till 12 p.m. every single weekday, called To The Point.
We're going to be talking about all the big issues that matter to you at home in Britain.
Absolutely, whether it's holding politicians to account, discussing what's taking place in the Channel, banging on about law and order, we're not afraid to do the absolute lot of it.
Yes, and if you're thinking it, you can guarantee that we'll be saying it.
Make sure you're here 9:30 a.m. till 12 p.m. every single weekday, right here on GB News for To The Point.
Brilliant stuff. Well, it is 10 o'clock. Coming up, the big question with Alan and Phil from Dire Straits. I cannot wait for that. They're with me now in the studio. So get your questions in, mark@gbnews.uk. Plus, more reaction to the big stories of the day with my superstar panel and tomorrow's front pages. But first, here's Polly with the headlines.
Good evening. Your latest GB News headlines this hour. The Prime Minister has warned the doomsday clock is still ticking, but he's told the COP26 summit in Glasgow a bomb disposal team is now on site. Boris Johnson also said the world faces both an economic and an environmental catastrophe if the climate isn't fixed.
My message to them, to the negotiators, is very simple. The leaders of the world may have left or are leaving COP now, but I can tell you that the eyes of the world, the eyes of the populations of the world are on you, and the eyes of the British government and all the other governments that care about this are on our negotiators, and we have your numbers.
Meanwhile, the US President Joe Biden says that tackling climate change has the potential to create lots more jobs. Joe Biden also criticised China and Russia for not turning up to the summit.
I think it's been a big mistake, quite frankly, for China, with respect to China not showing up. The rest of the world is going to look to China and say, what value added are they providing? And they've lost an ability to influence people around the world and all the people here at COP. The same way I would argue with regard to Russia.
And away from COP26, a British scallop trawler caught up in the fishing row is still being held by the French authorities, despite a suggestion by the Environment Secretary George Eustace that it had been released. France, in fact, stepped back from its threat to impose sanctions against the UK as negotiations continue between the two countries. But the French President, Emmanuel Macron, had threatened to block British boats from ports if the issue over fishing licences wasn't resolved. The family of a woman who died in a paddleboarding accident in Wales have described her as beautiful and kind. 24-year-old Morgan Rogers died while exploring a river in Haverfordwest. Police have confirmed the two other victims were 40-year-old Nicola Wheatley from Swansea and 42-year-old Paul O'Dwyer from Port Talbot. They were part of a group of 9 people who got into difficulty in the water over the weekend. Investigators believe a train that crashed in Salisbury in Wiltshire couldn't stop at a red signal because its wheels slipped on the track. 2 trains collided on an approach to a tunnel near the city station on Sunday. The Rail Accident Investigation Branch says evidence shows the driver did apply brakes, but the train failed to stop. And police in Western Australia have rescued a 4-year-old girl that went missing more than 2 weeks ago. Cleo Smith was found by officers after they broke into a house and a local man was taken into custody. She was reunited with her parents a short time later. You're right up to date. I'm back in an hour. Now back to Tonight Live.
It's time now for The Big Question, in which I meet the biggest names in the world of politics, showbiz, sport, music, literature and journalism. And it doesn't get much bigger than Dire Straits, an iconic British rock band formed in London in 1977. Their first single, Sultans of Swing, what a place to start, reached the top 10 in the UK and the US charts. Let's have a listen. Absolutely sublime. It was followed by hit singles including Romeo and Juliet, Private Investigations, Twisting by the Pool, Money for Nothing and Walk of Life. Their most commercially successful album, Brothers in Arms, has sold more than 30 million copies and was the first album to sell 1 million copies on compact disc alone. It's also the 8th best-selling album in UK history. According to the Guinness Book of Hit British Albums, Dire Straits have spent over 1,100 weeks on the UK album charts. I'm delighted to welcome 2 true legends of that band, Dire Straits co-producer and keyboardist Alan Clark and the fabulous Phil Palmer, legendary sideman, session guitarist and slide guitar supremo, who not only has played with Dire Straits on tour, but Bob Dylan, Tina Turner, Iggy Pop, Eric Clapton and apparently McCartney as well. So gentlemen, welcome to the show.
Good evening.
Wonderful to have you on the programme. I'm very excited because there's a live gig happening early next year. Dire Straits Legacy, featuring Trevor Horn and your good selves. You're performing at the O2 Indigo in London on January the 15th. Looking forward to kind of blowing off the cobwebs and seeing a live audience again.
Indeed. It'll be a nice change from the past 18 months, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, how has it been for an artist like yourself to be stuck at home in lockdown?
Doing a fair bit of recording in my studio at home and in a few in London. Yeah. But live gigs have been rare. I think I've done 2 in the past 18 months. Yeah. 3 actually, yeah.
And do the live performances help with the writing process, and have you therefore missed that?
I think I like to do both. I like to do live. I like to record. I like the whole aspect of the business. It's been unbalanced for the past 18 months because we've been recording most of the time, but yeah, it's going to be great to get back to live, that's for sure.
It most certainly is. And actually, you've been busy because you've released an album in the course of the pandemic, which I think is a fantastic achievement. You released the solo piano record Backstory.
I certainly have.
Just a month or two ago.
Indeed, yeah.
So was that a lockdown work of love?
Not really. It all began when I was invited to play at the Milan Piano Festival in 2019, I think it was. And then the person who persuaded me to do that, I took some persuading, I have to say. The person who persuaded me to do that persuaded me to make an album for a record company in Italy. And yeah, I was kind of reluctant to do it, but I've enjoyed the process, I have to say.
And what a career you've had. Being part of Dire Straits has meant that you've been inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame.
Mm-hmm.
How does it feel when you watch early footage of the band? You see that young man.
Yeah, it looks like my son. It's pretty cool looking back, actually. Yeah.
Did you know early doors that you were part of something special?
I joined the band in 1980, so they were already something special.
Mm.
But then they became...
And they'd had some hits, but they hadn't quite gone stratospheric, had they?
They went stratospheric about 5 years after I joined. I take full responsibility.
Absolutely, yeah. And how did the dynamic within the band change once you guys got really big? Did it change?
The band gradually got bigger. I mean, I introduced keyboards into the band, which was beautiful for me because it was... when I joined the band, they didn't have a keyboard player, so it was a blank canvas for me, which was a fantastic situation. And gradually the band expanded and got bigger and bigger and eventually exploded.
Yeah. And how did it feel? I mean, when you were selling millions of records, biggest band in the world at one point?
It felt pretty good. I mean, it's kind of different when you're out there doing it because you have a different impression of it, obviously, to everyone who's watching it from afar. It's a different experience, but it's a really good one at the same time.
Yeah, success tastes good, doesn't it?
It certainly does.
And how about you? I mean, listen, you are the supreme session man, and you've actually written a book called Session Man.
Correct.
And that's a real challenge, joining a successful band and making your own contribution. What do you have to do? Have you got to remember to play all the right notes in the right order, or can you make it your own?
You have to kind of be sympathetic to the up-front guy. And as a second guitar player, which I was, you can't step on them. And I worked with Eric Clapton directly before Dire Straits, so I learned how not to do it, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
But there was a crossover. Whilst I was working with Eric Clapton, we did a gig at the Nedwood Festival in 1990, I think it was.
Which was obviously massive.
It was a huge gig, yeah. And the two bands amalgamated for that show, and that was the first time I got to work with Mark and John Elsley. And I already knew Alan, because Alan had been in the Eric Clapton band with me a few years previous.
I think I was at the time, so I was actually in two bands at the same time.
Amazing.
Yeah.
It's remarkable.
Appearing on the same stage.
Was it difficult to follow Brothers in Arms? Did it become an albatross around your neck?
I guess it was a difficult album to follow, but we waited a good 5 years before doing it, so we were kind of ready to do something else.
Yeah.
And but it was pretty hard to follow that because it was so big.
And now you're planning this gig in early January, and you're going to start performing live again. What is your relationship to some of those songs?
I love them.
Do you ever get tired of them?
No. I mean, I think when you're out on the road playing, we did some massive tours with Dire Straits. I think you get to the point where you wish you had a night off rather than having to play them. But at the same time, you still love them and still play them.
I never got tired of them.
Right. Well, you didn't have,
You did it a lot longer than I did.
Yeah.
It was 2 years of my life out of a 50-something year career, but I loved it every night, and we still do. I mean, I think that's why the Dire Straits legacy exists.
Yeah.
because we just love to play the songs. The songs are so great.
The material is so good.
Yes.
And as a guitar player, what is attractive about those songs? I mean, it's a very guitar-heavy sound, isn't it?
Yes, it is. It's the quality of the songs. The songs are beautifully crafted. They're little journeys. The long stage versions that we do of Telegraph Road and Private Investigations, it's like a little movie. And people, the audiences love those versions. And Mark doesn't do it anymore, so we're quite keen to keep that ball rolling.
Well, yeah, I mean, any regrets that you can't get the original lineup together?
I'd love to, but Mark's busy doing his own thing, and that's always been the way ever since 1992, the last big gig we played together. I kind of knew that was it, really, and Mark was going to go off and do his own thing, and that was...
He wanted to draw a line and move on. It wasn't necessarily a rejection of his bandmates or any dissatisfaction.
No. He just wanted to do his own thing, and if he took members of Dire Straits along with him, then it would have been Dire Straits, which that's what he said to me.
Yeah.
So he has to go off and do his own thing, and that's...
Are you still in touch on a sort of personal note?
We don't live in each other's pockets, but he was in touch with me recently to wish me luck with my piano solo album, so that's very nice.
Yeah, I think that is fantastic. And your book is called Session Man, so did you know that was always going to be your career trajectory, that you would contribute to other bands?
Yeah, early on. I got into the whole session thing through my uncles who were in a band called the Kinks.
Kinks, yeah.
And I used to...
Not a bad pedigree, is it?
It was helpful, yeah.
Did they lend you any of their guitars?
They did. In fact, Dave brought me a lovely guitar back from America in 1971, and I was talking to him 2 days ago about it. It's turned out to be quite a unique guitar, but it kind of dictated the way I play that guitar. And I still have it, and it's a beautiful thing. It's called a Fender Nocaster, and there's a good history behind it if anybody's interested.
What is the history behind it?
It's quite long, but it's all in the book, Session Man. But
I mean, every guitar's got a story, hasn't it? Do you know how many guitars you've got?
Yeah, I've not got that many, about 25 probably.
Oh, just a few, yeah. Where do you store them?
Various places. I keep some parked around Europe.
Right.
I've got half a dozen.
So wherever you are, there's a guitar for you.
Kind of, yeah.
And what is the skill set, apart from being an amazing guitar player, what is the skill set required or the personality type required of a session musician? Because I suspect you have to be quite adaptable, as you said, quite respectful to the front man, the lead guitar player. But what about personality type? Maybe no ego?
No ego. I think probably all guitar players have an ego. But yeah, you have to be flexible. That's the thing. And
isn't it harder? It's harder than being in the band, isn't it? Coming in all the time.
It's
because you've got to always get up to speed.
Yeah, it's challenging, and that's what I like about it. Because I never know what I'm going to be asked to play.
No.
As a session player, you walk into a music experience, I think. And it was lovely to be on the stage with them. Alan's also played with Bob Dylan, and also on that night there was Joni Mitchell on the same bill. So I played with Joni Mitchell and Bob Dylan on the same gig.
Are these massive legends? I mean, you're legends yourselves, but I mean, are they difficult to be around? Is it daunting?
I found Bob Dylan to be a completely lovely man. I got on really well with him. I played pool with him, and great. Right. He's got a beautiful smile. Every time he smiled at me, I just.
And he engaged with you. You weren't just,
absolutely
this nondescript figure in the background.
No. Yeah. It's when you're working with these people, they're just other human beings, just other musicians who want to make music, and they're there for the same reason as we are, which is because we love music.
Well, yes, and we're going to be talking about Paul McCartney later because he's released the entirety of the lyrics of his career going back to the late 1950s, and you've played with McCartney as well.
I did several events with Paul McCartney. One notable one was the concert for Montserrat when the volcano on Montserrat exploded and blew away the studio that was there, which you used to work at as well.
George Martin's studio.
Yeah. George Martin in Montserrat. Yeah,
I spent 3 months there.
And we did an event as a benefit for the island, and it was we played like half a dozen Beatles songs. I was standing next to Paul McCartney singing "Hey Jude."
Yeah.
And I think that this is quite surreal, but it was a beautiful experience.
And did you get it right?
I did.
Have you ever come unstuck with a sort of a music diva that's just like dissatisfied with your work?
Very rarely.
There must be a few awkward customers out there.
There were a few. I mean, I've named a few in the book, but I've taken a few out as well because I didn't want to upset anybody in the book. But occasionally someone gets a bit of an ego going.
Care to name names?
No.
Probably because you're far too much of a gentleman. And you live in Rome now.
I do. I married a mad Italian woman called Emanuela, known as Numa.
And I would have thought that Dire Straits are big in Italy, as they are everywhere.
I think Dire Straits are big everywhere, weren't they? I mean, wherever we go with the legacy, it's a lovely reception, and everybody knows the material. So,
well, I think we might have some footage of a performance in Italy. Let's take a look at this. It's going to be a lovely little piece of music. Wait till you see this; you'll be very impressed.
That was in the street in.
Redazione Lecce 7.
Yeah, we got up and jammed with a little band who were.
And what was going on there? Oh, that sounds great. There you are.
I can't hear it.
You can't hear it? No. I can hear it in my ear, and it's just the most amazing jamming session you're having.
That was totally spontaneous.
I think it was in Bari.
Well, the crowd are absolutely loving that one, as are the viewers at home. It is remarkable. What do you think of, Alan, the modern music and stuff that's in the charts at the moment? Do you dig it?
I like it. I don't listen a lot to it, but I'm very conscious of criticising it because when I was a kid, when I was their age, the elder generation criticised what we liked. So. Now there's some great stuff out there. I mean, Sam Fender.
Yeah. Oh my God, incredible.
Amazing. So there's some amazing talent out there.
And of course, you're not just a keyboard artist, but you're a producer as well.
Mm-hmm.
How important is production for a great album? And tell me about the production on some of the Dire Straits albums.
Most of the production on Dire Straits albums was Mark Knopfler. Even when he wasn't credited for it in the early ones, he was responsible for it. Production is a big part of records, but it's not as big as the music, and the person who writes the music is the most
development of the stage versions of the songs.
Yeah. Well, look, so many emails coming in, chaps.
Cool.
Obviously, a gazillion fans out there. If Mark Knopfler wanted a Dire Straits reunion, would you be up for it? And if so, would you rather tour or make a studio album? There's a thought, Alan. Another album.
Would I be up for it? Yes.
Yeah.
Of course.
Would you be afraid to make a new album, given the weight of expectation? Dire Straits
afraid,
album.
No, but no. I think it would be a really interesting experience.
I think it would be nice to have another Straits album out there, wouldn't it?
It would, actually.
Do you think it? I mean, is it a case of never say never, or do you think it's not going to happen?
I think it's not going to happen, but yeah, never say never.
Lucy on Twitter there, what do you think of today's music? Well, let me ask you about that. What do you think?
I think there's some great young singers around. Music has changed for me over the last probably 10 years. It's become focused on the actual quality of the singer, the person singing. Take Adele, for example. A lot of her records, it's piano and voice, and it sounds amazing.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of young kids around doing that. The guy you just mentioned is amazing.
Sam Fender.
Sam Fender, yeah.
He is.
And Guy Garvey, people like that. I mean, just character in the voice, and I love that.
What's great about those two guys is they sing in their accent.
Yeah.
Oh, that's unusual, isn't it?
Well, but it's real.
Yeah.
You know, when you hear English people singing in American accents, like, oh, give it up.
Yeah, I know. It's very true. Another one from Greg on Twitter. Greg has asked this following question. How do you get money for nothing and your chicks for free? How's it done? What's the answer?
Join Dire Straits.
Yeah, that helps. You're a rock star. How about this one? And this is a question from Daryl on Twitter. Phil, who have you enjoyed playing with most?
It's been a wonderful journey. I love everything I do. I mean, very rarely I don't enjoy the music that I'm playing, but Eric was a special guy to be around, Eric Clapton.
Yeah.
He was so generous, and the band was so good. It was a lovely gig. I really enjoyed that.
I'll second that, yeah.
Yeah.
Eric was an absolute delight to be with, and the band was amazing. And we were with him when he made the Journeyman album.
Yeah, brilliant album.
Which Eric self-confessed favourite album.
Is that right?
Yeah.
Of his own?
Yeah.
Wow. And it's quite interesting, isn't it? Because here we are in early November, and currently topping the UK album charts is Elton John with the Lockdown Sessions. So, you know, I mean, you guys are younger than Elton, but sort of the two, there's a little bit of crossover, isn't there? And if you look at the enduring popularity of the likes of Elton John and the Rolling Stones, your good selves, I mean, I don't know, do you think they make them like that anymore? If we're honest.
I think maybe the business doesn't allow for people to endure that long, perhaps. Perhaps.
But it's disposable.
I could be proven wrong, and I hope I am.
Yeah. Have you played with Elton?
Yes, actually, we did on the same gig I mentioned before at the Nebworth Festival. He was on that too.
Yeah. Any problems there? Any temper tantrums?
No, he's lovely. Very funny man to be around.
When I was with Eric Clapton's band, which is, I preceded Phil in the band, we played in Japan with Mark Knopfler as a special guest and with Elton John as a special guest, which was kind of a good lineup.
Pretty spectacular. Well, I'm delighted to say that Phil Palmer's book is simply called Session Man, and it's clearly packed full of amazing stories, so do grab a copy, available from all good bookshops. And I can tell you that Alan Clark's latest album, A Lockdown Labour of Love, is called Backstory, and it's out now. Alan Clark and both the boys and Trevor Horn are on tour. That's right. You can see Dire Straits' Legacy, featuring Trevor, Alan and Phil, all from Dire Straits. They will be performing at the O2 Indigo in London on January the 15th, 2022. It will sell out, so get your tickets now. Go to theO2.co.uk. Gentlemen, a privilege to have you in the studio. Thank you so much for joining us. Brilliant stuff. Well, coming up, we'll have all of the news making the headlines today and tomorrow's front pages as they drop, including a gallery of gaffes from COP26. Also coming up, The Outsider with Darren Grimes on the online safety bill. Is it a threat to free speech? Plus your emails and lots more to come. See you shortly.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
I'm Colin Brazier. I've reported from more than 70 countries around the world, covered wars from Afghanistan to Iraq, from Lebanon to the Balkans. I'm trying to bring that experience, that feel for events, to the studio. And something else. I'm ready to give an opinion. Today's stories with a spark. Brazier from 8 p.m. weekdays on GB News.
Join us for Political Correction. We're here every Sunday to correct politics and put you, the people, back in charge.
We talk about all areas of the United Kingdom, including Northern Ireland.
Our debate goes way beyond the Westminster Village. It's about the real country. It's about your opinion. So please, we want you to tell us what you think.
This is Political Correction.
Every Sunday morning from 10 a.m. here on GB News.
Hi, I'm Patrick Christie's.
And I'm Mercy Moroki.
And we're hosting a show right here on GB News, 9:30am till 12pm, every single weekday. Call to the point.
We're going to be talking about all the big issues that matter to you at home in Britain.
Absolutely, whether it's holding politicians to account, discussing what's taking place in the Channel, banging on about law and order, we're not afraid to do the absolute lot of it.
Yes, and if you're thinking it, you can guarantee that we'll be saying it.
Make sure you're here 9:30am till 12pm, every single weekday, right here on GB News, for To The Point.
It's time now for The Outsider, in which top commentators speak out on a topic ignored by the rest of the media. Tonight, as always, I'm joined by the star of Reasoned UK, a popular online political channel. It's Darren Grimes. And Darren, another day, another example of an MP being viciously trolled online. Where do you stand in this balance between what the online safety bill is aiming to achieve and free speech?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think before we get into the deep stuff, I think it's worth just reflecting on what social media in and of itself has actually allowed us all to do. You know, you can share online, Mark, as you well know, everything from the birth of a child, a wedding, a new job. I think it's important to actually, at moments like this, before we get onto the really depressing side of things, think about what social media and that technology has allowed us, enabled us to do. You know, the reason we're speaking to each other right now is through technology. I think it's an amazing tool and a phenomenal tool that has allowed us to take advantage of that profoundly, innately human desire, essentially, to share experiences with one another. But it is, of course, and this is why the government is seeking to combat this stuff, it is open to abuse, right? It is open to, you know, enabling some avenues of communication to become, frankly, quite nasty and I think despicable people. You mentioned there's some abuse at MPs, where you're able to abuse social media to send some absolutely basically, I mean, the worst stuff you can possibly imagine. I don't know how people think about this stuff, Mark. I really, really don't. But where I stand on it, as someone who, as you well know, has been subject to one or two Twitter pylons in my time, I'll tell you that for free, Mark, it can be pretty alarming when you find yourself in the eye of the storm, as it were. But despite that, Mark, I do not think that the government are getting this right with their online harms approach and their online safety bill. I really think that it's getting quite, and I dare I say it, I know this is bandied about more times than you wouldn't believe, but Orwellian. I really, really do. In the Times newspaper, we have ministers allegedly set to overhaul communication laws altogether, where you're creating new offences for the harmful effect of a message. So, Mark, if I could end this interview right now and I could send you a torrent of vile abuse, that you could even then decide that, it really messed with your head that I'd said all of this stuff. And even if you just wanted to get me, the individual that's upset you back, I would face criminal sanction. Now, that to me, that just sort of, that's a completely different ball game that we're playing in then, right? That if I have offended you, you can therefore turn to the police and say, well, actually, he's caused me significant damage. That's really, really upset me. That was quite the blow. I can't do it. And I go back to that word, Orwellian, right? It's used far too often in contemporary politics. But for me, it perfectly encapsulates where we're at. You send a message with the intention to cause, and this is the language they use in the bill, emotional, psychological, or physical harm. Obviously, physical harm would be illegal, right? We all know and respect that. But government sources saying, for example, that anti-vaxxers spreading false information that they know to be untrue would be a good example of what would be illegal under the bill. I always go back to one example that I like, Mark, which is I would fall foul of this law now, were we to step in a time machine and go back to the early 90s when the World Health Organization told us that homosexuality was a mental disorder. Well, were I to, of course, disagree with the WHO, which I would have done, and said, actually, I don't accept that, I don't believe that being homosexual means you're mentally ill, I would fall foul of the current law because I would be, they would say that I had intent of spreading so-called disinformation and all the rest of it. I'm really worried, ultimately, Mark, about the real chilling effect that this will place on free speech and debate.
Yeah, I mean, the direction of travel is that at some point it could be that a joke could be framed as or described as hate speech, which is a real concern. And it's unusual, isn't it, and surprising that this comes from a supposedly libertarian Prime Minister and a freedom-loving Conservative government.
Well, I mean, Boris Johnson is doing so many U-turns, it's a wonder he's not in the U-bend, Mark. It is extraordinary. Because on everything from the green stuff, you know, he has accepted the green stuff with the zeal of a convert. You know, you would actually think that he was the high priest of green, the way in which he's going on this week. And on everything from, as you say, being a fearless journalist who has championed the platform of free speech most of his career. Now is the Prime Minister presiding over legislation which could, as you say, as you rightly say, we're in the age of the non-crime hate incident, Mark, where you tell a funny joke and you get reported for a hate crime, even if, this is the phenomena, even if there is found to have been no crime committed, you still have a non-crime hate incident attached to your name which comes up on deep criminal searches, background searches into your name. That's where we're at in Britain today under Boris Johnson. It's an extraordinary state of affairs, and I think actually I'm really worried that the government simply risk in seeking to combat the kind of abuse that football players got after the Euros, Mark, the kind of abuse that MPs get, and we're learning the wrong lessons, I'm afraid, after the death of David Amess, because in combating online abuse, the government simply risk, in my view, emboldening and actually arming the permanently offended with new legislative tools to shut down debate and speech that they don't like. It's all much too broad, it's much too vague, and I think open to abuse by those who want to shut down their political opponents. I'm genuinely deeply concerned by it, and I have no idea, even on a sort of, if I wanted to be kind to Boris Johnson right now, I have no idea where the upside is to this legislation. I can only see some quite severe downsides.
Yeah, I mean, the danger is we don't even have freedom of speech. We haven't got freedom of thought. And when you control language, you control thought, which is another Orwellian principle. Listen, Darren, fantastic stuff as ever. I know you're returning in a week's time when Dan is back in the hot seat. So look forward to seeing you a week today. Coming up in Uncancelled at 11, we've got a lively one. Mike Parry, former TalkSport boss, of course, Fleet Street legend, and Beatles biographer Leslie Ann Jones will appraise the career of music legend Sir Paul McCartney. Is he a misunderstood genius or a prize numpty? What do you think? Mark at gbnews.uk. Are you a McCartney fan? Who was the best Beatle? Was it Lennon? Was it McCartney? Was it Ringo? Or George? Let me know your thoughts. We'll have a Beatles love-in after 11. But first, in our media buzz, would doctors really rather strike than see their patients? We'll discuss that after the break.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
I'm Colin Brazier. I've reported from more than 70 countries around the world, covered wars from Afghanistan to Iraq, from Lebanon to the Balkans. I'm trying to bring that experience, that feel for events, to the studio. And something else. I'm ready to give an opinion. Today's stories with a spark. Brazier from 8 p.m. weekdays on GB News.
Join us for Political Correction. We're here every Sunday to correct politics and put you, the people, back in charge.
We talk about all areas of the United Kingdom, including Northern Ireland.
Our debate goes way beyond the Westminster Village. It's about the real country. It's about your opinion. So please, we want you to tell us what you think.
This is Political Correction.
Every Sunday morning from 10 a.m. here on GB News.
Hi, I'm Patrick Christie's.
And I'm Mercy Moroki.
And we're hosting a show right here on GB News, 9:30am till 12pm, every single weekday, called To The Point.
We're going to be talking about all the big issues that matter to you at home in Britain.
Absolutely, whether it's holding politicians to account, discussing what's taking place in the Channel, banging on about law and order, we're not afraid to do the absolute lot of it.
Yes, and if you're thinking it, you can guarantee that we'll be saying it.
Make sure you're here 9:30am till 12pm, every single weekday, right here on GB News for To The Point.
Sandra says, hi Mark, my husband was a singer and also did a lot of session recording in London, and Mark Knopfler and Dire Straits were always part of the musical life in our home. Money for Nothing and The Chicks for Free was a part of his life before we were married, of course, says Sandra, and we actually played Going Home at his funeral. Well, Sandra, I'm so sorry for your loss. I'm sure you've got very happy memories of your dear other half. So, the media buzz in a moment, but first to an extraordinary story unfolding in Australia. A missing 4-year-old girl, Cleo Smith, pictured there, has been found alive and well after disappearing from a campsite in Western Australia more than 2 weeks ago. Cleo was holidaying with her family at the Blowholes campsite in McLeod, around 560 miles north of Perth, when she vanished during the early hours of the 16th of October. A team from Western Australia Police broke into a locked house in Carnarvon around 1 a.m. on Wednesday morning, where they found the little girl in one of the rooms. A man from the area is now in custody. Police, who had offered a $1 million Australian dollar reward for information on Cleo's whereabouts, have not given more details on the man in custody. But to get the latest on this amazing story is a very, very good friend of mine, journalist and writer at the Australian newspaper, Sophie Ellsworth. Hi, Sophie.
Hi, Mark. How are
you?
Really
well. We're normally talking about the draconian COVID measures in the beautiful country of Australia, but this is a truly good news story.
Oh, Mark, this story, it just brought tears to so many people's eyes this morning, that this beautiful little 4-year-old Cleo, who went missing 2.5 weeks ago, and as you can see from those images, in pretty remote part of Australia, so over on the west coast in Western Australia, she was camping with her family and was disappeared in the middle of the night. Her parents woke up to find that she was gone. Her mum and her mum's partner found that Cleo was gone. The story, Mark, just gripped the nation. I mean, obviously we've got such huge parcels of, desert out there in Western Australia. It's a beautiful part of the world, but it is remote. And as the days passed on, there was concern for whether or not Cleo would be found alive. They searched trash cans, the police and detectives. They searched hundreds of kilometres of highway, scrubland. And to hear this, wake up to this news in Australia today, Mark, is just a beautiful story that should give everyone hope.
Yes, and I'm afraid to say, Sophie, that all too often, if you hear about a disappearing child, after 2 weeks, you start to give up hope. So, I mean, that makes this news sort of, all the more positive that after a fortnight, she reappears.
Oh, absolutely, Mark. As I say, as the days went on, people were losing hope. A lot of little kids were asking about this case. It resonated with anyone out there. I mean, it's just such a sad story. It resembled a famous story here of a little baby, Azaria Chamberlain, who was taken by a dingo, decades ago and killed. And it was resembling that case. And this case gripped the nation, Mark. And as I say, just to wake up to this news, she's alive and well. She hasn't gone to hospital. She's back reunited with her family. It's an absolutely beautiful story. And I'm so thrilled that it's making global headlines. It's wonderful news that we all need right now, Mark.
It really is. And obviously we can't go into too much detail about the case, but the police will be investigating the possibility of this being an abduction, I guess.
Absolutely. So just before I came on air, they said that a man has been arrested. There's very limited details about who this man is. I'm sure that will unfold over the course of today, Mark. But the most important thing here is that it appears she hasn't been harmed. given she's not in hospital. She's back with her parents, back with her mum and her mum's partner, and just so wonderful. I would love to be a fly on a wall to see that family reunited. A beautiful story, Mark.
It's wonderful. Look, before we let you go, whilst we have you, Sophie, can we talk about the COVID situation in Australia? What's the latest?
Well, Mark, things have taken a turn. We've reached almost 80%, or we might be around 80% now. Double vaccination rate, it's hovering around that depending where you live. Things are opening up. It's a very slow process to get the economy back up and running. I had the lucky situation of actually being at the Melbourne Cup yesterday. It was very few people there, but it was great to see crowds back. It's great to see Australia back opened internationally too, Mark. Please come and visit us. We want people back here. We want Australia back shining. We're a beautiful country and we've got so much to offer. And I hope this is the start of a wonderful beginning for Australia that is back.
Well, definitely. I need no encouragement going to Australia because it's a country I admire and love. And I've never physically visited, even though I've got so many friends there. And really briefly, the clock's against us. But earlier in the show, in my monologue, I was discussing Jacinda Ardern, the Prime Minister of New Zealand, who's had a busy week. First of all, she was interviewed earlier this week, proudly saying that New Zealand is going to be a two-tier segregated society, more or less bringing apartheid back to a Western nation based upon your medical status. And a video that's emerged in the last 24 hours of her shutting down a journalist for asking a question about the vaccine. What do Australians make of the leadership of New Zealand? What do they think of Jacinda Ardern?
Well, Mark, it depends which side of the political fence you sit on. She's obviously very woke. I would say she's very much a socialist. She's obviously on the left side of politics. To be honest, I think, she often insults Australia. She said she didn't want a situation where we'd end up, with the pandemic that we did here. They're a small country, New Zealand. They need Australia. We are very close neighbours. I don't have a lot of nice things to really say about Jacinda Ardern. I know she's hugely popular, but I don't agree with a lot of things that she says. And I think to have a two-tiered society is just a shocking thing, Mark. And she should not be welcoming something like that. No one should be welcoming something like that, Mark.
Well, I completely agree. You can find Sophie Ellsworth on Twitter, and Sophie is a top journalist at the national newspaper of Australia, The Australian. She's one of their media team there. So many thanks, and we'll catch up soon, and we'll look forward to more positive stories going forward, hopefully, Sophie. Well, with me is my fantastic panel, but first, here are the front pages of tomorrow's papers. Let's start, shall we, with the FT. And their front page splash. Banks under fire for diluting green pledges since Paris Climate Accord. Next up is the Metro. Pledge to save Earth's lungs. That's right, a further development in this massive COP26 summit, which is happening in Glasgow. And it's quite an interesting story, actually. Boris Johnson has hailed a historic pact by 110 countries at the COP26 climate summit to end deforestation, calling it a deal to save the lungs of the planet. Leaders of nations controlling 85% of the world's forests pledged a £13 billion fund, not just to end their destruction, but to reverse it by 2013. And I can't imagine too many people would disagree with that policy. OK, where should we go next, Jake? OK, the Telegraph, here we go. PM seeks to replace standards watchdog. Boris Johnson will today attempt to reform the House of Commons standards watchdog following its decision to ban Owen Paterson from Parliament. Tory MPs and ministers will be ordered by the government whips to support a backbench motion which could lead to the disbanding of the Commons Committee on Standards and replace it with a brand new body. Next up, The Guardian. Devastating fires of 2021 pinned on global heating. The heat waves and wildfires that caused widespread devastation in Europe this summer would not have happened without global heating, a new analysis shows. Meanwhile, hundreds of the world's biggest banks and pension funds with assets worth $130 trillion have committed to finance the global economic shift to a low-carbon world the government will announce today. OK, next up. OK, well, let's go to my panel right now. Still with me, and with me for the duration, former editor of the Daily Star, Dawn Neeson, political commentator, Andre Walker, and GB News' brilliant head of digital, Becca Hudson. Now, the left-wing union chief for GPs has resigned over plans to ask GPs whether they would support a strike over proposed face-to-face appointments. Dr Richard Vaughtry, who has led the rebellion against the government's plans to force doctors to see more patients in person, made the announcement yesterday at the British Medical Association's GP committee as it opened its vote to ballot its members. The ballot comes after the government promised action to ensure people could see a GP in person. But the BMA's GP committee has voted to reject the plan, with doctors now given 2 weeks to say if they would support strike action. Dawn, why are we having this conversation?
I think it's mad, Mark. I mean, we're asking GPs to do their job. Before the pandemic, 80% of GP appointments were face-to-face. We're now down to 60%. And even doctors themselves say that 93% of doctors actually believe that face-to-face consultations are the only way to do this. I mean, by not seeing people face-to-face, people are dying. We do know that. So I think, you know, for doctors to strike now over seeing people face-to-face, it's just...
Well, do we know why they won't do it?
Well, I mean, most of them are incredibly hard-working. No, I don't think you can dismiss all GPs as that.
The suggestion that the majority of GPs are hard-working, I think, is unfair.
I didn't say the majority. I said a lot of GPs are very hard-working, and a lot of GPs will not vote to go out on strike.
I'm not sure I've ever met a lazy GP, actually.
Well, the big problem you have, Mark, is the way that we misunderstand this. First of all, the NHS is not one body. There are hundreds of different bodies working together. GPs are effectively working in the private sector. Each of their practices is effectively a private sector health body.
Yeah, and that's why the average salary for a GP is £98,000, by the way.
Which, by the way, I think is massively too much. But anyway, if you look at it, what the certain people in the NHS, trade off the underpaid, hard-working people in the NHS. So if you look at nurses, unbelievably highly skilled, dreadfully badly paid.
£23,000 a year.
Yeah, and then some other people just sit on their bums. I will tell you something, and this is the reason I've got no mercy for these people. As you know, my mother died of lung cancer during the pandemic. Yeah. Right. That is an incredibly difficult situation to go through. Yeah. Her local GP, aged 43, stopped working completely and self-isolated during the entirety of the corona. He's still not back at work. Right. There are some people who have absolutely taken the mick. I'd use the P word, but I won't on this. And I think people have a legitimate right to be furious with these people.
No,
and at the same time, and you think to yourself, why is there no equality here? Take some of the money off these wealthy fat cats in these private sector, effectively, GPs' practices, and give it to the nurses. Let's do some fairness here.
Why this pushback about face-to-face appointments, do you think, Becca?
I think that there's a really interesting case to have them. I think it should be an option that you can have. So if it's a repeat prescription or it's just something...
Of course, there are some appointments,
and I think that it's kind of great that we have the option. They can obviously see more people if they're doing it virtually. If people are self-isolating or you're nervous about going out, whatever, I think it's a great service to have an offer. But... absolutely, to agree with both Andre and Dawn, that this will endanger people's lives because we know that this is the way that we'll pick up on early symptoms of cancer. This is also really important for detecting abuse, domestic violence, all kinds of things that you won't, but will not get picked up on a virtual appointment. So I think it's been a really great innovation from the pandemic that we're able to do it, but it absolutely can't become the norm. And with 93% of doctors saying this is a far more effective way of keeping us safe and keeping us alive, I struggle to understand the reason that they wouldn't want to return to more face-to-face.
And threatening to strike is not a good look, is it, at the tail end of the pandemic, when the country's been through so much? I mean, it's a case of saying to the unions, read the room, guys.
Yeah, I'd actually agree. I think it isn't a good look, is it, to strike, especially because we know that there's this huge backlog of cases. We've got so many undetected, everything from cancer, breast cancer, all kinds of illnesses, heart disease.
Yeah, it's
We've got
completely
undetected over the last 18 months. And, we all need to get back to normal, and I think that's strike.
Will the NHS ever recover to where it was before the pandemic? Because the latest now is a suggestion that full A&E departments will have a kind of overflow area, a sort of lounge where you'll sort of, you know, essentially going to be waiting until you get seen by an A&E
To one
doctor.
extent, I hope the NHS doesn't get back to how it was before the pandemic, because I don't think it was fit for purpose. I think it is incredibly top-heavy. I think there are managers on 200,000. I think the highest paid manager in the NHS is something like £450,000 a year, whilst, as I said just now, the average nurse is on £23,000 a year. It needs, I mean, it's a cliche, but a root and branch overhaul. At the moment, we are promising billions and billions to go into the NHS. And yes, it needs investment, but it needs investment in the right areas. And I'm not convinced that it's going to get it at the moment.
Can I give you a brilliant example? I've got a friend of mine whose sister is an absolutely superb nurse at, I think it's called Kingston Hospital. Either way, she studied at the University of Kingston. And what she said was the reason that junior doctors in NHS hospitals are rushed off the feet is because the BMA, that trade union that nobody admits is a trade union, insist that doctors are the only people who can give injections of certain kinds and prescribe medicines of certain kinds. And she said what happens is we sit there, we're with the patient, we know what to give the patient, we're used to it, but we can't administer it, so we have to wait for this junior doctor who spends his life running around the building, not spending any time being a real doctor, just satisfying a requirement that the BMA is putting in place because it's a trade union protecting the GPs.
And yet during the pandemic, it was perfectly OK for ordinary volunteers who are not at all medically qualified to give vaccinations.
Yeah, briefly, Becca, I mean, I just worry that the public have gone from admiring and loving the NHS to resenting it. We've seen reprehensible attacks on staff at GP surgeries, and that can never be justified.
No, absolutely not.
But the public are, perhaps in many cases, rightfully angry.
I don't know. I think the NHS is a source of huge national pride. I think it's that kind of national.
I think that's in the past.
So I think, you know, sure, this is not great. The idea of GPs not doing more face-to-face appointments, of course. But we need to remember that these people were the people that kept us and our loved ones alive. They were selflessly trying to keep the community safe. They have, and as you say, they've been the victims of huge levels of abuse, of criticism from anti-vaxxers to just people, you know, who are getting frustrated because their family aren't able to get the treatment that they need. And we need to, you know, this is a vocation, and we should be so lucky that people want to go and work in the community and keep us safe.
I don't mean to be awful to you, but the reason why my family couldn't get the treatment that they needed was because a 43-year-old GP could not be bothered going to work because he was quote-unquote self-isolating. My charge to him is, you're just lazy, you just couldn't be bothered. I'll tell you one thing he did do. All the letters went out for the winter flu vaccination because he gets a bonus for those. He was straight back to work to do that.
Well, I do think that supermarket workers continued going to work, and security guards,
bus
other
drivers,
people in the private and public sector, they carried on. And I think it's terribly important that GPs get back to business as usual. But what's your experience of GPs' services been like in the course of the pandemic? Mark at gbnews.uk. It's day 2 of COP26, and you know what that means? More rather amusing gaffes and bizarre moments from world leaders and so-called eco-warriors. Thanks to my team for putting this together. Let's start with our favourite climate fighter, Greta. Yesterday, the eco-activist was filmed leading protesters in a chant outside the summit with a new take on coming round the mountain. Here it is.
You can shove your climate crisis up your arse. You can shove your climate crisis up your arse. You can shove your climate crisis. You can shove your climate crisis. You can shove your climate crisis up your arse.
Well, Greta and her posse weren't the only group making a mockery of the Eco Summit. Climate activists from the Green New Deal Rising group were filmed wearing Squid Game costumes, and various world leaders were wearing masks or masks of world leaders as they demanded that politicians stopped playing climate games. Now, if you thought that a bunch of loudmouth teenagers and hypocritical world leaders were bad, Jeff Bezos may take the cake. The multi-billionaire gave a lecture to world leaders today, saying that his trip to space made him realise how special the Earth was.
I was told that seeing the Earth from space changes the lens through which you view the world. But I was not prepared for just how much that would be true. Looking back at Earth from up there, the atmosphere seems so thin, the world so finite and so fragile.
Great speech, but hard to take that from someone who flew in his £48 million private jet from celebrating Bill Gates' 66th birthday on a £2 million a week super yacht off the coast of Turkey. And look out, Prince Charles, there is definitely a new king on the block. Remarkable stuff. Lots of emails coming in. Audrey on GP surgeries. Hi, Mark. I phoned my GP surgery yesterday to try to see my doctor for the first time in over 4 years. I was told to ring back today at 8 a.m. to book a call with a GP. No success. Audrey, I'm so sorry for your situation. Lots more to come.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
I'm Colin Brazier. I've reported from more than 70 countries around the world, covered wars from Afghanistan to Iraq, from Lebanon to the Balkans. I'm trying to bring that experience, that feel for events, to the studio. And something else. I'm ready to give an opinion. Today's stories with a spark. Brazier from 8 p.m. weekdays on GB News.
Join us for Political Correction. We're here every Sunday to correct politics and put you, the people, back in charge.
We talk about all areas of the United Kingdom, including Northern Ireland.
Our debate goes way beyond the Westminster Village. It's about the real country. It's about your opinion. So please, we want you to tell us what you think.
This is Political Correction.
Every Sunday morning from 10 a.m. here on GB News.
Hi, I'm Patrick Christie's.
And I'm Mercy Moroki.
And we're hosting a show right here on GB News, 9:30 a.m. till 12 p.m. every single weekday. Call to the point.
We're going to be talking about all the big issues that matter to you at home in Britain.
Absolutely, whether it's holding politicians to account, discussing what's taking place in the Channel, banging on about law and order, we're not afraid to do the absolute lot of it.
Yes, and if you're thinking it, you can guarantee that we'll be saying it.
Make sure you're here 9:30 a.m. till 12 p.m. every single weekday right here on GB News for To The Point.
On face-to-face appointments, Colin has emailed Mark, I think my doctors are already on strike because they can't even be bothered to answer the phone. Colin, I'm very, very worried about where the NHS is going. I think there's a risk it's going to be like the BBC, a service that all of us pay for, but many don't actually use. Now, my panel will be nominating their Greatest Britain and Union Jackass in what's going to be a lively last hour of the show. Plus, we'll be reacting to all of the big stories of the day. I've got tomorrow's front pages as well. But first up, here are the headlines with Polly.
Good evening. Your latest GB News headlines this hour. The Prime Minister has warned the doomsday clock is still ticking, but he's told the COP26 summit in Glasgow a bomb disposal team is now on site. Boris Johnson also said the world faces both an economic and an environmental catastrophe if the climate isn't fixed.
My message to them, to the negotiators, is very simple. The leaders of the world may have left or are leaving COP now, but I can tell you that the eyes of the world, the eyes of the populations of the world are on you, and the eyes of the British government and all the other governments that care about this are on our negotiators, and we have your numbers.
Meanwhile, the US President Joe Biden says that tackling climate change has the potential to create lots more jobs. Joe Biden also criticised China and Russia for not turning up to the summit.
I think it's been a big mistake, quite frankly, for China, with respect to China not showing up. The rest of the world is going to look to China and say, what value added are they providing? And they've lost an ability to influence people around the world and all the people here at COP. the same way I would argue with regard to Russia.
Well, staying with COP26, around 40% of the global financial sector are set to sign up to Paris climate targets. At the summit tomorrow, the Chancellor will reveal that 450 companies will commit to limit global warming to 1.5 degrees above pre-industrial levels. The Chancellor, Rishi Sunak, is also expected to say how the UK will become a net zero financial centre. Investigators believe a train that crashed in Salisbury in Wiltshire couldn't stop at a red signal because its wheels slipped on the track. Two trains collided on the approach to a tunnel near the city station on Sunday. The Rail Accident Investigation Branch says evidence shows the driver applied the brakes but failed to stop. Facebook says it's going to shut down its face recognition system and delete the face prints of more than 1 billion people. More than a third of the social media network's daily active users, that's around 640 million people, have opted in to have their faces recognised. In 2019, the company ended its practice of using the software to identify users' friends in uploaded photos and then automatically suggest they be tagged. And in Western Australia, police have rescued a 4-year-old girl who went missing for more than 2 weeks. Cleo Smith was found by officers after they broke into a house and a local man was taken into custody. She was reunited with her parents a short time later. You're right up to date. Now back to Tonight Live.
Many thanks, Polly. Fantastic stuff. Well, it's 4 minutes past 11. Uncancelled in a moment, we're going to have a look at the career of Paul McCartney. A misunderstood genius or a prize numpty? What do you think? Get your thoughts in about Paul McCartney right now. Was he better than John Lennon? Tell me about that. Your views on the Lennon-McCartney relationship, the great rivalry. We'll discuss it with a top Beatles biographer and Mike Parry, legendary Fleet Street journalist. But at this point in the show, we always look at tomorrow's front pages. Let's start with the Times. PM hails deal to cut methane emissions. World leaders agreed a deal yesterday to curb emissions of the planet's second most polluting greenhouse gas as Boris Johnson expressed optimism for success at the Glasgow Climate Change Conference. The PM said that 2 days of talks had given a sense of how the world could achieve the cuts needed in greenhouse gases. He was speaking after 103 countries signed a deal to reduce methane emissions by 30% by the end of the decade. If fully implemented, the pledge could limit global warming by about 0.2 degrees centigrade by 2050. However, in a setback to the meeting's aim of limiting the rise in global temperatures to within reach of 1.5 degrees, China's chief climate negotiator questioned the objective. There you go. What does that tell you? Everything you need to know. The Independent: heat waves of 50 degrees centigrade every year. Europe's reality without climate progress. The Mail: how low can the Met go? Cressida Dick was last night told to get the rot out of Scotland Yard after 2 officers admitted sharing photos of the murdered sisters. Of course, the dreadful, dreadful miscarriage of justice there. And we'll give you more details on that later in the show. The Sun: Richard and Susie. Richard Madeley is to replace Piers Morgan as a full-time presenter on Good Morning Britain. The Star will appear with Susanna Reid after finalising an estimated £300,000 a year deal. Richard will officially start after appearing on I'm a Celebrity. A source said he's a proven winner with viewers. Meanwhile, the Daily Star: he who smelt it dealt it. The planet was officially saved yesterday after gas-guzzling world leaders decided to crack down on parping heifers. Top jobs, say the Star there. There we are. Mirror next: 60,000 carers face sack over jabs. Social care could be pushed to the brink of collapse as 60,000 unjabbed staff face the axe within days. The Daily Express: free blood pressure monitors to save lives. Blood pressure monitors will be handed out by the NHS to slash the death toll from heart attacks and strokes. It's hoped that patients checking their levels at home will highlight problems far earlier before they become serious. And lastly, the eye. Booster jabs rollout for over 50s has stalled. Third jabs plan for over 50s will not be completed until February if England's vaccine programme continues at the current rate. Those are the front pages. It's time now for this. Yes, it's time for Uncancelled, in which we take a look at the dark underbelly of the news agenda. Today sees the release of The Lyrics, 1956 to the present by Paul McCartney, a comprehensive collection of pop lyrics by the most successful composer of the 20th century. Worshipped by some as the greatest British songwriter of all time, but dismissed by others as a thin-skinned, insecure crank with a chip on his shoulder. So what's the truth? Is this icon of popular music and British culture simply a misunderstood genius? To discuss all things McCartney, I'm delighted to welcome Lesley-Anne Jones, who has written at length about the Beatles in her best-selling book about John Lennon. It's entitled Who Killed John Lennon? The Lives, Loves and Deaths of the Greatest Rock Star. It won rave reviews and it's a bestseller. I'm also joined, speaking of bestsellers, by Fleet Street legend, biographer as well, former boss of TalkSport Radio and self-confessed super fan of the Beatles, Mike Parry. Great to have you both on the show. Lesley-Anne, can I ask you, first of all, your reaction to this release of all of McCartney's lyrics? It demonstrates, doesn't it, just how prolific this guy is.
It's not actually all the lyrics of all the songs. He's chosen 154 songs. Why? Randomly, I guess, in response to the many requests over the years to write his autobiography. He never kept a diary. So where is he going to start? You know, he's not going to read other people's books and glean the information from there. So he decided to tell his story through the lyrics to certain of his songs. And he's worked with an Irish poet, a guy called Paul Muldoon. They've taken 5 years over this. Paul has been interviewing Paul and he's put together a transcript. And they've created not something chronological, but actually going through the chosen songs alphabetically. So it leaps around. And it's got a lot of stuff in it that actually is already out there. The story in particular about John Lennon having quit the Beatles first before Paul McCartney, that's actually in my book. So maybe he picked it up out of there.
I think he might have done a bit of plagiarism. But Lesley-Anne, I mean, the guy, he is a songwriting machine, isn't he? It's remarkable just how much work he has produced over the years.
Totally. There's a great story that he was with Dustin Hoffman on one occasion. And Dustin said to him, Paul, can you write a song about anything at all? And Paul said, yeah, I'll show you. And he sat right in front of him and he wrote the Picasso's Last Words song, the one that goes, drink to me, drink to whatever. Can't remember the lyrics. It's on Band on the Run, but it's a very famous track. Yeah. And Dustin said he saw with his own eyes, actually, this guy can just sit there and write a song. So it is almost machine-like. He wrote his very first song at the age of 14. I Lost My Little Girl. That was actually about his mother who died when Paul was about 11. And that's what started it, really. There's always dysfunction. There's always tragedy. There's always something missing in a child who goes on to be a creative songwriter. I've examined these guys for so many years and there are so many similar traits. There has to be something that kicks it off and it's generally something tragic.
Absolutely, and of course that united the two songwriters. Lesley-Anne, before I come to you, Mike, Lesley-Anne, can I ask you about the lyrics themselves? I mean, we know what a remarkable gift for melody Paul McCartney has. Is he much of a lyricist, or do you think that John Lennon had the edge when it came to soulful words?
It's impossible to compare them because they were such different songwriters. John was acerbic and caustic and wrote advertising slogans, really, that he linked together to create songs. Paul's been a much more soulful writer, somebody who's dug very deep into his own emotions. He has written about his life experiences all the way through, whereas John, I think, resisted the reality of his own life, and he was a bit more abstract. He strayed into fantasy worlds and wrote about people he'd made up rather than actually writing about himself. So I think we can't and we shouldn't compare them.
Mike Parry, what do you think this book of lyrics will tell us about McCartney the artist, McCartney the man?
Well, look, McCartney's the most famous man on earth almost, isn't he? You know, everybody on planet Earth's heard a Beatles song, and Paul McCartney's either written half of it or all of it, so we'll know about that. Just to remind my great friend Leslie Ann, by the way, it was Drink to Me, Drink to My Health. She quite rightly says that track from Band on the Run. The thing I get from it is that, you know, I'm a Beatles fanatic. Leslie Ann is a professional. She's a renowned historian of the Beatles. I'm just a fanatic who wants to know everything I possibly can about all the Beatles, John Lennon, Paul McCartney, everybody else. The closest I've ever got to a biography was this one, written by Leslie Ann's very good friend Philip Norman. But there's so much more in the lyrics book. For instance, I kind of knew that the song She Came In Through the Bathroom Window was written about one of the Apple Scruffs who spent their time camping outside Paul McCartney's house. But until I got into the detail of this book, the lyrics, I didn't realise that she climbed up a ladder, got in through the bathroom window and stole a picture of a member of Paul's family, thought to be his father, and then left again. And then Paul McCartney had to go out to the front gates and negotiate to get his picture back. And, you know, gems like that are just absolutely wonderful. There's a real revelation in here about the film A Day in the Life, which was one of the most famous Beatles songs ever. I think it was the last track on Sgt. Pepper's. And everybody always asks, why did Paul McCartney bother inserting the words in the middle? You know, it was John Lennon started it, John Lennon finished it, and Paul McCartney, you know, got up, got out of bed, I dragged the comb across my head, is in the middle. But when this book comes out, people have had a look at it, and I've been looking at it, and Paul McCartney now claims ownership on the, you know, the main line in that song, which is he blew his brains out in a car. And for years, it had just been assumed that that was John Lennon's line, but Paul, you know, claims some ownership to that. The great thing about it is it not only tells us a lot about Paul McCartney, it tells us an awful lot about John Lennon as well. Because as you quite rightly say, they had this love, not hate relationship, but a love rivalry relationship all the way through their careers together. And Paul glosses a little bit over the tension times. For instance, there are some songs that Paul wrote which John Lennon hated. Oobla dee, oobla da. He couldn't stand it. And the other one was Maxwell's Silver Hammer, which even Ringo Starr has said was one of the most difficult songs he ever worked on because it was so complicated, you know. And Paul would insist on doing it again and again and again. And that may well have done, or may well have led to the start of the end of the Beatles, because John was accusing Paul of his granny music, but the granny music looks pretty good to me in the lyrics book when you examine the all the words. The other thing I got out of this, which was incredible, was I didn't realise We Can Work It Out was actually a message to Jane Asher. When Paul McCartney and Jane Asher were going out together, Paul McCartney was living in the Asher family house near Harley Street because her father was a doctor. And, of course, he was off touring around the world and she was at home in London. And this was the first sign that their relationship was going to crumble. We can work it out. If you look at the lines, you know, try to see it my way. He was actually saying that to Jane Asher. And let it be a plea to the other Beatles. Let's stop rowing. Let it be. He wanted the Beatles to go on. It's very obvious from that in his words of the song, Let It Be.
Leslie Ann,
you know what? I'd love to say that a lot of these stories are actually in my book. So this is not new stuff. I think Paul is he's revisiting his life and he's revisiting the stories. He's forgotten, because he's of a great age now, he's forgotten that a lot of this is out there already. The song you referred to just now, A Day in the Life, traditionally John's song. We've always believed that John Lennon wrote this song. The guy they're referring to is a deceased gentleman called Tara Brown. He was killed at the age of 21. He was the Guinness heir, and he blew his mind out in a car, not his brains. But
his mind, his brains,
Paul said for years that he wrote this about a politician. And now he's saying, no, actually, it was about Tara Brown. But did John write that or did Paul write that? John isn't here to argue. And that's the thing that's sad for me, is why wait until now? You know, Paul's had 40 more years of life than John Lennon had. He's not here to state his case.
Well, do you
so
think
why
McCartney-
would Paul try and reclaim these songs now?
Well, I agree with you, Leslie Ann, and you know, I think Paul's got previous on this, because didn't he attempt at one point to change the accreditation of their songwriting to McCartney-Lennon rather than Lennon-McCartney?
All the way through his life.
Which was overruled by Yoko Ono. Is that right, Leslie Ann?
It is right, and I think that was simply a case of it didn't sound right. You know, when we introduce couples to each other, we tend to say Wendy and Phil rather than Phil and Wendy. It's just the way around that it sounds right. It has a ring to it. Lennon-McCartney sounds better than McCartney-Lennon.
But why did he make that? Why did he make that intervention? Because I don't think he won many plaudits for that. Given, as you said, that John Lennon's not here to have that debate.
He must be insecure in some way. Why would Paul McCartney be insecure? I mean, why is he doing this is the bottom line. John isn't here to give his side. Paul doesn't need the money. I would have told him, let it be. We can't love him any more than we do.
Mike, listen, the man's a genius. That's very clear. The most successful composer of the 20th century, but a lot of people just don't like Paul McCartney. They think he's a bit of a numpty. You know, they acknowledge his talent, but they just find that he goes around saying, you know, what is it? You know, peace man, and you know.
That was his wife Linda, really. I mean, that was her influence. Her V-sign type for peace and all that was a traditional sign. Anybody who thinks Paul McCartney is a numpty is, I'm afraid, a numpty themselves. You know, there is no greater musical genius living on this planet. There is no man who has shaped and created life in the second half of the 20th century. Because the Beatles weren't just songwriters. The Beatles changed the world. Before the Beatles, the world was black and white, coming out of the morose 20 years after the Second World War. After the Beatles, it became Technicolor. The world was turned to Technicolor, and it never went back from that, honestly. They invented hippiedom. You know, the word hippie didn't even arrive in this country until 1966, and then the Beatles became at the forefront of that movement. I mean, their contribution to the cultural development of life over 6 or 7 decades cannot be underestimated, and it's fascinating to be able to read all the details. I appreciate very much what Leslie Ann has said. I've read all Leslie Ann's books, and yes, some of the stories are in there. But to see the actual personal explanation from Paul McCartney for some of them is outstanding. On the Lennon-McCartney thing, I think he refers to it in this book that John Lennon was 1.5 years older than him. So he got to Brian Epstein, who was their legendary manager, about whom a new film is coming out very shortly. And because he was the senior member of the group and he was older and it was kind of his band, he got to Epstein and said, I think it should be Lennon-McCartney, because before that, it had been McCartney-Lennon on 2 of their very early singles. And I agree with Leslie Ann. Why on earth would Paul McCartney feel insecure about anything? I mean, even John Lennon, when he was alive, has made the statement, I had nothing to do with yesterday. He literally said, everybody knows the famous story that he woke up in the middle of the night and scribbled down scrambled eggs. You know, I love your legs, or something like that. But Lennon never... Yes. Never claimed ownership of one word of yesterday, and yet Paul McCartney went off on one, didn't he, you know, some years ago, and said, I just want to turn it round on that one song, McCartney-Lennon. But everybody in the world knows that Paul McCartney wrote that song. It's the most re-recorded song in history, and people always refer to it as Paul McCartney's Yesterday.
Well, that's it. And, you know, Mike, I appreciate your enthusiasm for the book. I'm looking forward to having a look at it very, very soon, although it comes in at a whopping 75 quid, which is not for the faint-hearted. But Leslie Ann, briefly, with the clock against us, why is McCartney so thin-skinned and obsessed with his legacy? As Mike says, he doesn't have to be. He really is an absolute legend of music. For example, he lashed out at the Rolling Stones recently, saying that the Rolling Stones are a blues cover band. I mean, that's not very classy, is it?
Yeah, they did start out as a blues cover band. That's what they were doing. But the Beatles also were recording other people's songs in the early stages. This is what all bands do when they start out, because that's how they get good at what they do. They do their 10,000 hours recording other people's work, and then they start to write their own. Why is he insecure? Because it's the nature of the artist. It's the personality of the creative genius. They're never quite good enough in their own eyes. And that's the thing that drives them forward to become even better and to become
and also
the
Leslie
genius
Ann,
that Paul is.
and also fair to say he is very, very competitive.
Of course. Yeah, I was with him actually, must have been July 2019 up in Liverpool at the graduation day for LIPA, the Liverpool Institute of Performing Arts, which is in his old grammar school in Liverpool. And he's the patron of the school, obviously. And we had a long chat in the green room before the ceremony started. And he's as sweet as pie. He doesn't forget anybody. He remembers people's names. He remembers that he went to their wedding, or, you know, he last saw you on a path in Florida, or whatever it is. And that's something else that adds to his genius, is that he doesn't forget anything. However, I think he might have forgotten a few things about the lyrics he's written about here.
Brilliant stuff. Listen, Leslie Ann, wonderful to have you on the show. Do have a look at Leslie Ann's amazing book about John Lennon. And Mike Parry, you're returning to the studio very soon. Can't wait for that. One of my absolutely favourite contributors to the show. Legendary former boss of TalkSport, of course. Fleet Street journalist. What a career that man's had as well, frankly. Well, look, Mike will be back very, very soon indeed. Lots of emails coming in on this. Mike says, Dear Mark, when two geniuses are in competition, the results are sublime. Both John and Paul were incredible songwriters. To choose one over another is merely personal preference. I love the Beatles, says Declan. John Lennon would have spoken out louder and more proudly. Paul McCartney's silence is deafening. There you are. Brilliant stuff. Well, there you go. Look, lots more to come. We've got more of the big stories. We'll get reaction from our panel. Why is Joe Biden in Dawn Neesom's bad books? We will reveal all in today's Greatest Britain and Union Jackass. But next in a media buzz, after Greggs was voted our nation's favourite dining brand, is the United Kingdom totally devoid of class? I don't think so, but what do you reckon? Mark at gbnews.uk. It's going to be a lot of fun. Stick around, see you in 2.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
I'm Colin Brazier. I've reported from more than 70 countries around the world, covered wars from Afghanistan to Iraq, from Lebanon to the Balkans. I'm trying to bring that experience, that feel for events, to the studio. And something else. I'm ready to give an opinion. Today's stories with a spark. Brazier from 8 p.m. weekdays on GB News.
Join us for Political Correction. We're here every Sunday to correct politics and put you, the people, back in charge.
We talk about all areas of the United Kingdom, including Northern Ireland.
Our debate goes way beyond the Westminster Village. It's about the real country. It's about your opinion. So please, we want you to tell us what you think.
This is Political Correction.
Every Sunday morning from 10 a.m. here on GB News.
Hi, I'm Patrick Christie's.
And I'm Mercy Moroki.
And we're hosting a show right here on GB News, 9:30am till 12pm, every single weekday. Call to the point.
We're going to be talking about all the big issues that matter to you at home in Britain.
Absolutely, whether it's holding politicians to account, discussing what's taking place in the Channel, banging on about law and order, we're not afraid to do the absolute lot of it.
Yes, and if you're thinking it, you can guarantee that we'll be saying it.
Make sure you're here 9:30am till 12pm, every single weekday, right here on GB News, for To the Point.
Let's react to the big stories of the day with my fabulous panel. Former editor of the Daily Star, Dawn Neesom, political commentator, Andre Walker, and GB News' brilliant head of digital, Becca Hudson. Now, when you think of the UK culinary scene, what comes to mind? With the likes of Jamie Oliver, Heston Blumenthal and Marco Pierre White, the UK is brimming with incredible Michelin-starred eateries. But a YouGov poll has revealed where Brits really love to dine, and it may be rather surprising. According to the poll, Greggs took the top spot, with over 70% of people saying it's their favourite place to dine out. Not far behind was KFC, Costa and Pizza Hut. So, are we now a nation of, wait for it, chavs, whatever class we pretend to be? Becca, what's your culinary guilty pleasure?
I don't like chavs, firstly. I don't know what that means. I don't think that
It's a very pejorative term, isn't it?
Incredibly pejorative. But I don't think there's anything wrong with enjoying a delightful meal at Greggs or KFC or any of those places. I'm quite partial to a Pizza Express myself. So
not Pizza Hut. An important distinction.
No. But I think that's. I guess we could probably guess.
You don't like the deep crust. Prince Andrew.
Yes. I think this is. I think it's great that we're not a kind of a nation of culinary snobs. Don't you think?
I do, and I think Greggs is especially good late at night.
Right. Will you have one after this?
After a wild evening on the tiles. There's a brilliant flagship branch of Greggs in Newcastle. And it opens, I think, it was open all night, I think. God. So you can get yourself a sort of steak pie at 4 a.m. Just the ticket.
How wonderful.
Absolutely, that's culinary heaven.
Yes.
Right, I want to know how long Wootton's been away and how much you're at play, because you know full well that you and I worked at a different outlet and I got into trouble for the following thing. When we were going through the whole question about, I was working in politics at the time, do Conservative politicians know how much a pasty was at Greggs?
Yes.
And my answer was, which you've never let me cease to talk about, it is, well, I've never eaten a pasty at Greggs. I have the four sausage rolls for £2.70. It's 4 for 3, right?
It's a bargain.
It is a bargain, right? The problem is, you buy the 2 and you think, I'll just have the 2. I'll just stick the other 2 in and have them tomorrow. That never happens on the train, does it? So look, you've consistently had a go at me about this, but now I'm telling you, the best thing is the 4-piece Colonel's meal from KFC. And look, no, I don't want to diss your colleague here, but Pizza Express, no. It's all about Pizza Hut. Eat as much as you like, $5.99, including the pasta.
But I think there's too much of an American slant on your choices, because the great news about Pizza Express and Greggs is they're British.
Yes.
KFC, Pizza Hut, American rubbish.
Yes. I think that's probably right. But look, there is nothing greater than going into Greggs at 10 o'clock in the morning, 4 for 3 on your sausage rolls. And also, there's a better deal on. It sounds like it's not. By the way, I am not an advert for Greggs by any stretch of the imagination.
You sure?
But no, it's not what I'm saying. It's the look. But let me say to you, if you buy them cold, you can get an even bigger discount.
Wow. Is there anything better than going into Greggs at 10 in the morning, Becca?
I've never done it, so maybe I'll try tomorrow and see. But I mean, the passion with which Andre speaks of Greggs.
But wouldn't you agree? Now, look, Becca, as a mover and shaker in the world of the media, you will have been to a few posh eateries in your time. And don't you think that they are the ultimate con? Because the portions are so small. It's an absolute racket, isn't it?
But doesn't this speak into what you were talking about, the Americanisation of food and the idea that kind of the cheaper, the bigger the plates, and kind of supersizing, and actually kind of the quantity of the meal isn't really what it's about. It's about the kind of care and the lavish attention that's applied to your, dough soul.
I go to some of these restaurants and come out hungry.
Really?
Yeah.
If you
don't you think haute cuisine?
But if you go for a Japanese meal, you always go to McDonald's before.
Is that to line your stomach?
No, can we just stop with this? No, we don't.
No, I think you go to Mackie D's, it's a palate cleanser, isn't it?
I don't go to McDonald's. I don't eat McDonald's.
Well, I can see that.
No.
How about Greggs?
No, I don't, no. And let's be honest, these places are only listed as popular because they're only places the government let stay open during the pandemic.
Well said.
Even though there was an obesity crisis.
I reckon goes to gyms.
I reckon one of my thighs is the width. I reckon one of my thighs is the width of your waist, which does say something.
I would
about
like to compare, but I think it could get us in trouble.
I'm not going to go into body size anywhere.
However, is there a wider point about how there's an aspect
if there's a
of human
wider
nature?
point, he ain't got it.
I made the jokes. You can't do that to me.
That could be very triggering.
Fattest. I've been triggered.
But isn't there a bit of all of us Brits that likes a little bit of cheap, a little bit of rough? Whether it's food or whether it's a clothes shop, doing things on the cheap. Somehow we've got.
Do you want to tell us more about this, Mark? What else have you been doing?
I mean, I'm going to tell you that you can buy really posh hamburgers in the supermarket now, can't you? With this sort of Aberdeen Angus, and it's all very sort of fancy schmancy. But actually, my favourite burgers are frozen bird's eye patties, OK, which have probably been in the freezer for months on end, but I don't think anything beats them.
Don't you know there's a climate crisis going on? What are you doing eating meat still?
I'm going to
For
get in
gosh
trouble for that.
sakes! Should be vegan burgers.
Oh.
But do you like, I mean, do you have any sort of cheap, guilty pleasures? Because my other passion, we've talked about it on the show, is Primark. And I like, what I have, I've got a great appetite for a bit of tat. I love a bit of tat. How about you, Becca?
Mark, you didn't actually have to tell us that.
Cheap, on or in your body?
No. Not at all, no.
What?
Thanks for clarifying.
Imagine. How about you then? Have you got expensive taste, Andre, apart from Greg's?
Well, I'll tell you something. I quite like my local auction, believe it or not. You can buy stuff cheap. I got 7 bottles of Fortnum & Mason champagne for 100 quid.
None of which is drunk tonight, obviously.
Well, get out of it. I'm not as bad as other people.
Who knew? Moving swiftly on. The world's richest man, Elon Musk, has said that he will sell $6 billion worth of Tesla stock if the United Nations can prove it would solve world hunger. The CEO of the innovative yet incredibly expensive car brand was hitting back at comments made by the UN World Food Programme Director David Beasley, who claimed the ultra-wealthy need to step up to solve world hunger. Musk said he's willing to rise to Beasley's challenge and donate billions to the UN if they can prove how it will be spent responsibly. He has pointed to open source accounting so the public can see how it's being spent precisely. In 2020, the UN World Food Programme raised $8.4 billion and failed to solve world hunger. So would Musk's billions really make the difference? What do we make of Elon Musk weighing in here? Do we think billionaires should do more to solve issues like poverty, Becca?
I mean, entirely, yes, of course. I mean, he could give away most of his net worth and still be far richer than any of us, which would be quite wonderful, wouldn't it? I mean, I absolutely, and I think the idea of sort of challenging the UN, it all just smacks of a kind of very fragile ego, doesn't it? So I should love to see him put some money into more humanitarian causes.
But is he not calling out this organisation for being very inefficient at actually transforming lives?
So set up your own private enterprise that will save lives and target malnutrition and redistribute wealth and support developing economies in the global south. I mean, he could do it all himself. I think just to sort of challenge the UN. It's just.
I'm sure he's got charitable causes, but do you not think that actually what's needed at places like the UN is more of an entrepreneurial spirit, that these organisations are not so wasteful, so bloated?
I think we over celebrate entrepreneurs, and I think it's a very specific type of very fragile male ego that needs to become a billionaire. And I think that's not what we need at all in the UN or any kind of philanthropic organisation. We need people who are motivated by wanting to save the world and improve lives. And I'm not sure that's Elon Musk.
But he's just thinking, this guy's about results, and he's like, where's the bang for your buck with all the billions that go into these organisations?
So give them more billions, because you've got.
Well, no, he's calling them out for being inefficient, and he is the king of efficient organisations.
What does he know about redistributing wealth to the developing world?
I think he'd like to. I think he fancies his chances at having a go, doing a better job than the UN. I mean, I think there are parallels with those enormous charitable organisations where there are head offices and chief executives on 6-figure salaries, and you're thinking, where's this money going?
So he's been able to make loads of money in a very specific way with these silly cars, and we now think that he can solve, that these people are somehow kind of super gods that can solve the world's problems. They can't. There are experts who dedicate their lives not to accumulating personal wealth. They go into their lines of work to save lives, and I think to kind of undermine their efforts or to criticise them because they're not Elon Musk, I think is quite disappointing.
I don't know. I think people like Elon Musk, they get things done.
The problem is with all of these international organisations, what they always say is, I know we're inefficient, I know we make mistakes, we're better than us not existing at all. In many cases, that's simply not true. You look at the behaviour of the World Health Organization at the beginning of this pandemic, where they specifically covered up the actions of Communist China.
Yeah.
Next, you look at the Sex for Food programme that the UN operates. When will the United Nations remove diplomatic immunity on sex offenders in Asia and Africa who worked? They've refused to do it so far. You look at the European Union promoting democracy. They've created wars in Georgia and the Ukraine. Now, OK, so did Vladimir Putin, but it takes two to tango. Time and time again, and by the way, my own church, the Catholic Church, the Vatican's behaviour over child abuse was unbelievable. Time and time again, we let these people away with it because we think they're better than nothing. They're not better than nothing.
I think the UN and the World Health Organization have got an awful lot to answer for during the pandemic in particular, especially with the way no one seems to be calling China out. I mean,
in bed with China, really.
Quite literally. I mean, the World Health Organization, nothing to see here. And it's like, we all know there are. And they are black holes for money. So, you know, whether Elon Musk will be any better or not is another matter.
Do you know what we are, Dawn? We are the muggins countries. Because what we do, taxpayers in Britain, America, Australia, Canada, France, wherever, we pay the bills for these organisations that are run by... I mean, bear in mind, the UN had Colonel Gaddafi on a Human Rights Commission, right? We pay the bill, and these ridiculous despotic regimes are the ones that benefit time and time again. The muggins countries need to stop paying.
Interesting stuff. Regarding cheap sausage rolls, Avril has said Jempsons do 4 sausage rolls for £2.50 in Bexhill. I'll be hitting them up next time.
There's also the Pound Bakery in Warrington, which will do 4 for £1. Why are we getting into this, right? We just can't.
Why are you obsessed with sausages?
I'm not obsessed.
Sounds like a bargain.
It's him. He starts it every single time. Every programme I ever come on with you start it. I made a good point about international bodies, and it's ruined by sausage rolls.
I'm afraid so. You've been heckled by a food dish. Rob in Bolton says, Mark, you can't beat bird's eye burgers. I agree with you. Fantastic stuff. Well, there you go. Now, is it too early to be seeing Mariah Carey in a Santa outfit? Well, yesterday, the pop superstar released a bizarre video to mark the start of the festive season. Take a look. And some eagle-eyed fans spotted this little tease. There you go. Look at that. The 5th of November. That's right. The All I Want for Christmas star is launching a new Christmas song in 3 days, but her announcement didn't go entirely to plan. Taking to Twitter, her chart topper tagged her collaborators, the chart topper tagged her collaborators and wrote, "Fall in Love at Christmas out 11.5. But the singer accidentally tagged the wrong Khalid, sending her 21 million followers to a random person. Despite the misstep, Mariah's new song will most likely be a chart topper. And of course it is, isn't it? The most wonderful time of the year. Brilliant stuff. Now, Mariah Carey, I mean, she equals Christmas, doesn't she?
I love that song, I must admit. How old is it now? 21 years old, that song originally?
Yeah.
Love the dress too. Definitely one for Christmas Day, Becca. Possibly not Andre. I'm
up for
but
it.
Yeah, well, that's the problem. But no, I mean, it is great. But I still I've still got my Halloween pumpkin. I'm a bit concerned about that. And that was a bit pumpkinist. I mean, she was taking a baseball bat to a pumpkin.
Yeah, it's a little bit strange,
I
wasn't
mean,
it?
yeah.
Becca, do you think that Mariah's still got it? Is she still queen?
Absolutely. She's absolutely a queen. And if she says it's time for Christmas, it's time for Christmas, so you've got to get rid of your pumpkins.
I haven't had a birthday yet. It's too early.
When is the correct moment? What is the correct date with which to kick off Christmas, do you think? Can we all agree when it should start?
Right, OK. Well, my birthday's exactly 2 weeks before Christmas Day, and my mum and dad never let me put the Christmas tree up until it was the day after my birthday. So I would say the 12th of December.
Right, because your big day is the 11th.
Yeah.
And have you kept to that tradition?
Yeah, pretty much. I know.
I think Christmas should begin on the 1st of December. I mean, that's when you can start putting up decorations and going shopping, and it ends on the 31st of December.
I'll tell you what I was used to do. Day before Christmas Eve, go to Euston Station, buy whatever's at M&S, bottles-wise, stick them in the bottle bags, and that's your Christmas shopping done. Head back.
That is such a boy thing, though, isn't it? It really is.
There's nothing wrong with that. A lot of thought went into which type of M&S wine to purchase.
I love it. OK, brilliant stuff. A few emails coming in across a range of topics, but I'm afraid sausage rolls dominates. Steve says £5 for £1 in Walker's in Newcastle.
Wow.
And he reckons
that's my cousin.
Steve says there are going to be new Saudi sausage rolls soon. Because that's a city transformed, is it not?
Yeah, quite.
Let's be honest about that. A sartorial question from Noel, who says, "Hi, Mark, love the show. Please, could you tell me the name of your makeup colour? I have a garden fence which needs treating."
I'm sorry.
Well, let me tell you, it's Trump orange. There you are.
Mahogany face.
There you
Mahogany
go.
Face.
Tomorrow I'll go for David Dickinson Brown.
He's invented his own new ethnic minority, especially for the show.
I think what we should do is put you and I next to each other, by the way, because you're looking a little paler shade of grey today.
No, do you know something?
Still doing Halloween.
When you've got skin like mine, when you need factor 30, you've got to put something on to get over it, right?
See, I keep forgetting
I stand by
you
makeup.
are a strawberry blonde, of course.
Indeed.
Now, there's nothing more frustrating than missing a delivery. The logistics of planning your day around a parcel that might be delivered in a 6-hour window is nearly impossible. But some people may have had it a little worse. Customers have shared the hilarious and infuriating ways that delivery drivers have left parcels on their doorstep. This sly delivery driver thought about this long and hard. Can you spot it? Behind the branch. Look at that. That's incognito, isn't it? What about this one? At least he was accurate with where to find it. Package inside bush. There you go. Or how about this driver who went the extra mile? There you go. A few stones on top.
Dear
That'll
Lord.
make all the difference. The effort of this postman is immeasurable. Look at that. That's extraordinary, isn't it? That is somebody that... basically, the postman has just sort of dumped all of the post into the floor, basically the entrance of a whole block of flats. An absolute disgrace. And that's from my brilliant brand new producer, Mescano. So thanks for sharing that one. How about the effort of this postman? OK, well, there you go. Well, look, lots more to come. I've got to ask you guys, have you had any delivery horrors over the years?
Yes, we had one where it was, and you're going to love this story, it was the delivery of a crate of wine, obviously very, very rare occurrence for us. And it quite clearly had wine written on the box, and they left it literally, and we live in a block of flats, so a bit like your picture of the mail there.
Yeah.
They left it literally in the main lobby area where everybody had to walk past it.
Oh,
just
God.
literally, you could fall over it, and it's quite clearly a crate of wine.
Yes.
And it was just sheer luck that I went down there and saw it and rescued it.
I've got a bad one. I don't know if I should even tell you this, but one of the things I did when I worked in the House of Commons, one of the most ill-advised thing of all the ill-advised things I did, we organised a party for the National Hairdressing Council, and L'Oreal sent us a load of shampoos and quite expensive hair care stuff. And for whatever reason, they stamped every single box with warning, risk of theft. Do not deliver to neighbour, and our office was next door to Keith Vaz. So I always thought that
Oh,
was
my goodness.
a delicious insult to Mr Vaz.
And on that bombshell, this is from Andrew. Mark, having moved from Leicester, where people only ate pies and pasties, to Bruges, I can say that Greggs is not really considered a credible baker. It's just a cheap and cheerful place to get low-quality diabetes bombs and a usage rolls made from... Oh, sorry, I think you might have dictated that one. Sausage rolls made from dubious sources. Well, Andrew, I think the quality at Greggs is very high, but I do accept your point about diabetes and carbohydrates. But there you go. Don't get me started on that one.
No, don't.
Now,
Seriously.
before the end of the show, what has Terry Gilliam done to annoy Becca? We will reveal today's Greatest Britain and Union jackass after this.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
I'm Colin Brazier. I've reported from more than 70 countries around the world, covered wars from Afghanistan to Iraq, from Lebanon to the Balkans. I'm trying to bring that experience, that feel for events, to the studio. And something else. I'm ready to give an opinion. Today's stories with a spark. Brazier from 8 p.m. weekdays on GB News.
Join us for Political Correction. We're here every Sunday to correct politics and put you, the people, back in charge.
We talk about all areas of the United Kingdom, including Northern Ireland.
Our debate goes way beyond the Westminster Village. It's about the real country. It's about your opinion. So please, we want you to tell us what you think.
This is Political Correction.
Every Sunday morning from 10 a.m. here on GB News.
Hi, I'm Patrick Christie's.
And I'm Mercy Moroki.
And we're hosting a show right here on GB News, 9:30 a.m. till 12 p.m. every single weekday. Call to the point.
We're going to be talking about all the big issues that matter to you at home in Britain.
Absolutely, whether it's holding politicians to account, discussing what's taking place in the Channel, banging on about law and order, we're not afraid to do the absolute lot of it.
Yes, and if you're thinking it, you can guarantee that we'll be saying it.
Make sure you're here 9:30 a.m. till 12 p.m. every single weekday right here on GB News for To The Point.
It's time now to reveal my panel's greatest Britain and Union jackass. So, the Daily Star, former editor Dawn Neeson, political commentator Andre Walker, and GB News' very own Becca Hudson. So, Dawn, let's start with you. Your greatest Britain.
Right, OK, my greatest Britain is going to be the humble poppy. We're all wearing one tonight.
Yours is quite bling, I've got to say.
It's very bling.
Been spent.
Yes, it is. Money has been spent because otherwise the paper ones I just constantly lose. So, but mine is going to be the humble poppy. Obviously, we're coming up to Remembrance Sunday, and the Royal British Legion needs to help raise £43 million. They obviously operate the poppy appeal because COVID lost them £20 million last year. And let's not forget that they help all the forces and the family members of the forces. And it's so important that we remember the people that have sacrificed so much that we can sit here and have opinions and debate stuff and be free to live our lives.
Definitely. And I think that this organisation is going to have a problem post-pandemic, which is the lack of available cash that we've got in our pocket these days. And I don't just mean as a result of the pandemic.
No, but the fact that people
recession.
Are not doing cash anymore.
We're in a cashless society. So I was in a health food shop and I was paying with my card and they had the poppies. The first time I saw the poppies, I thought, I need one of those. It's like, I don't have £1 or 50p on me.
No. A lot of charity collectors are now armed with card readers, so you can do that. But I'm still trying to get my head around the fact that Boris thinks cash is anti-green and we shouldn't be using cash anymore. But people should get out there and put some money in the collecting box if they have it, or use their card on the card
But
reader.
I think, Becca, the era of small change is over now. I don't think we'll be going back.
Yeah, no, I think you're right. And I think it's a grave shame for charities, for small businesses, for people who don't have, who aren't kind of financially literate. I think it's a grave shame, and it's such a shame that such an incredible cause, like for poppies, would suffer as a result of it.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So how about your greatest Britain, Andre?
You've never heard this one before. Right said Fred.
Oh,
right.
wow.
Richard Fairbrass is my next-door neighbour, but that's not the only thing that I love about him.
Whose house is bigger, his or yours?
Oh, come on. Be realistic, right?
How many hit records have you had?
Yeah, but the thing is, it only takes one, doesn't it? But let me read to you how he defeated The Independent yesterday. So The Independent had a front page, I don't know if it's going to come up, where it said...
There it is.
The majority want government to enforce another lockdown to stem COVID cases, poll finds. Nearly 40% of respondents are calling for another lockdown. What? How is that at all a majority? So, Right Said Fred says, journalism at its finest. Now, I will tell you, there's many great things about Right Said Fred, but when your national newspaper knows less about mathematics and the pandemic than the bloke who sang I'm Too Sexy, Deeply Dippy, and whatever that other one was, I think it was the Stonk,
yes.
then you've got real problems.
Notwithstanding whether it's a majority or not, and I think mathematically we can agree that 40% is not a majority, but how much veracity do these polls have when it comes to the public's enthusiasm for lockdowns? Because I'm suspicious, to be honest. I think that if a question is phrased in a certain way, which is if it would save lives, should we lock down and stay home? People will feel
Well,
pressured to say yes.
one of the big problems we've got is the way that we're in our own bubble to too much of an extent. I mean, I used to meet one group of people who'd go, I don't know anybody who's voting Leave, and another group of people who go, I don't know anyone who's voting Remain.
Yeah.
Right? And so I think there is an element of that. But I have to say, in my own view, I don't meet many people who genuinely want this draconian lockdown and stopping Christmas. And if the polls say a majority of people want Christmas to be cancelled, I can't see it myself.
No, I was on the tube reading one of these very polls the other day and said that 80% of people want compulsory mask wearing on public transport. And I looked around the carriage, Mark, which was fairly packed, and about 3% of the people wearing masks on there.
What does that tell us, Becca? Do you think people feel pressurised to give the correct answer in a poll rather than the honest one?
Well, I think we see this a lot, don't we, with kind of exit polls, you know, people, you know, shy Tories, people who were shy about voting Brexit because of kind of what the consensus is. So I think you're right. I think, you know, it's vastly unscientific, and I've not met anyone that's clambering to cancel Christmas.
And it's worrying that a lot of what has driven government policy is the polls. And if they're not accurate of the true sentiment of the British people, that's a worry, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. But I suppose we need to find better ways of staying in touch with monitoring public opinion, and maybe your inbox this evening, which is very lively, is a better place for us to start.
Yes, well, absolutely right. I'm known for the size of my inbox, and it's filling as we speak. Now, Dawn, on that bombshell, your uni... Oh, no, wait a minute.
We haven't asked Becca.
No. Becca.
Come
on. So naughty.
That was naughty.
Disgrace.
My greatest Britain is the National Trust, who this week voted to ban trail hunting because they feared that people were using their land to kill foxes. And I cannot imagine the fragility of a person that would need to kill a fox. So I think the National Trust is my favourite progressive organisation in this country, and one of our largest landowners deserves to be my greatest Britain today.
Good shout. I can agree with that wholeheartedly.
Absolutely, yeah.
Big fans.
Well said. Brilliant. How about your Union Jackass, Dawn?
Oh, my Union Jackass is so obvious. It's President Joe Biden, who flies in on a gas-guzzling jet, then drives to COP26 after landing at the wrong airport in a motorcade of 20 gas-guzzling cars, promptly falls asleep during the opening ceremony, which was fairly dull, so don't blame him. Meanwhile, in the US, new data shows that coal-fired power generation has leapt 22%, the first increase since 2014. So, a big jackass.
Can't
a hypocritical
disagree.
one.
I've got to say, how about you? Your Union Jackass.
Oh, do you know, everyone's going to kick off at this because I've complained so many times about Harry and Meghan, but aren't they just symptomatic of exactly what Dawn was talking about? The billionaire flying to gob off a little bit. They had trouble getting into stuff at COP26. I don't know exactly what they've done, but they even wrote a letter because they wanted to be noticed in the media. Yeah. I think there's a huge amount of this. You know, there's a brilliant interview with Andy Burnham where he says a lot of people are going to think that they don't want to be lectured by billionaires in the time of an economic downturn. Not many things I agree with Andy Burnham on, but I have to say I agree with that. Harry and Meghan, just go and work for Netflix or whatever it is. Get on with it. Make all your money. Leave me alone.
There you go. Cri de coeur there from Andre Walker. Becca, your Union Jackass.
Terry Gilliam, the Python star, who has been cancelled by the Old Vic for his heinous views on trans rights and the Me Too movement, and who famously said that he's tired of old white men being blamed for everything that's wrong in the world. And I have a bit of a spoiler for him, that they kind of are. So I'm very relieved that he's been relieved of his post at the Old Vic.
Can you characterise this enormous group within our society as responsible for everything?
I think maybe, because he then went on to make some very distasteful comments about black lesbians.
Is it wrong to identify the colour of someone's skin as being a group responsible for anything? I mean, that's racism, isn't it?
No, absolutely. It's whiteness as a power structure, as the patriarchy.
I mean, if you said black people are responsible for all of the bad things, that would be racist. It would be horrific.
But whiteness, we're talking about whiteness as a power structure, aren't we? And we're also talking about his
including poverty-stricken white people in this country.
We're not disregarding.
What about poor middle-aged white men who are just scratching a living on the minimum wage?
Who exist as part of a power structure.
Oh, lucky them.
And
they don't know how they're going to pay their bills, but apparently they're privileged.
I mean, actually, this is part of the reason why people wanted to tear down society over Brexit. This idea that Tony Blair wanders round going, think about how the European Union has benefited you economically. Guys in Wigan and Salford and Bradford are wandering round saying, you may have created jobs, but I've got 3 of them and I still can't pay the mortgage.
Interesting stuff. Well, look, it's a big old debate, isn't it? But Terry Gilliam, I mean, he had been commissioned to actually be involved in this project, Stephen Sondheim, Into the Woods. A great production. What did he say? He said he thought Me Too was a witch hunt.
Yeah.
I mean, he's entitled to his opinion, even if he's wrong, isn't he?
He said that actresses who went for meetings with Harvey Weinstein in a hotel room knew what they were doing, and that Hollywood is full of ambitious people who have a price.
Now, I don't necessarily share that view, but he's entitled to have that view. Why should he be cancelled for that?
He made the employees of the Old Vic incredibly uncomfortable, and I can't imagine...
Tough luck. Life's uncomfortable. Life's unfair. The world is a difficult place.
You think that that's OK to make them work?
I think he's entitled to have his view. I don't agree with it, but I wouldn't sack him. I wouldn't decommission him from a project.
But if the whole organisation...
for sharing that view.
If the organisation find that so offensive, they don't feel safe in that workplace...
Well, they are safe. What's going to happen to them?
Well, they've got no idea. I mean, what kind of reckless view? You have no idea what's going to happen to them. And
well, he's taken a view, but just because they disagree, that makes them feel unsafe. That's not his problem.
The Old Vic has a pastoral responsibility to the people it
So what, he
employs
shouldn't offer a different view about Me Too?
You can offer a different view, but I think that you don't need to disregard what is a really significant movement in the way that he did. And there are really clever ways to talk about Me Too, and there probably are people who... And we can talk about the victimisation of men, but that isn't what he did.
Well, more to come tomorrow. Thanks for watching.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of 2 wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
I'm Colin Brazier. I've reported from more than 70 countries around the world, covered wars from Afghanistan to Iraq, from Lebanon to the Balkans. I'm trying to bring that experience, that feel for events, to the studio. And something else. I'm ready to give an opinion. Today's stories with a spark. Brazier from 8 p.m. weekdays on GB News.
Join us for Political Correction. We're here every Sunday to correct politics and put you, the people, back in charge.
We talk about all areas of the United Kingdom, including Northern Ireland.
Our debate goes way beyond the Westminster Village. It's about the real country. It's about your opinion. So please, we want you to tell us what you think.
This is Political Correction.
Every Sunday morning from 10 a.m. here on GB News.
Hi, I'm Patrick Christie's.
And I'm Mercy Moroki.
And we're hosting a show right here on GB News, 9:30am till 12pm, every single weekday. Call to the point.
We're going to be talking about all the big issues that matter to you at home in Britain.
Absolutely, whether it's holding politicians to account, discussing what's taking place in the Channel, banging on about law and order, we're not afraid to do the absolute lot of it.
Yes, and if you're thinking it, you can guarantee that we'll be saying it.
Make sure you're here 9:30am till 12pm, every single weekday, right here on GB News, for To the Point.
Tonight on Farage, a huge number of migrants crossed the English Channel today, taking us through the 20,000 number. Nearly all of them young men. Are they refugees or economic migrants? Boris Johnson talks trees at COP26. Well, if he cares that much, why do we still, at Britain's largest power station, continue to burn trees? And joining me on Talking Pints, economist Vicky Price. First, though, the news.